Chapter 1071. In the main hall of the Illumination Dragon lineage. 3 elders of the Illumination Dragon lineage were sitting inside. An old man walked in. It was Elder 4 of the Illumination Dragon lineage. There's news from the primordial divine spring that Long Imo has just woken up and recovered from his injuries. Furthermore, he's already at the Void Reversion realm. Elder 4 said in a deep voice, I heard that this lad has already headed to the mixed dragon lineage. Where's Long Chio and the others? Elder 3 asked. Elder 4 said, they've already brought their men over aggressively. They should have gone to fight Long Imo. The 4 elders looked at each other. We'll find out soon whether he's a dragon or a worm. The Grand Elder said with a smile. The mixed dragons had an extremely low status among the dragons. Although they occupied a place in the Dragon Bone Valley, they occupied a very small area. Furthermore, dragons of the mixed dragon lineage had many restrictions in the Dragon Bone Valley and could not go anywhere. Among the 5 lineages, most of them played the role of servants. The lower the level, the more chaotic it was. Among the 5 lineages, fights between dragons of the same lineage could happen at any moment. In the mixed dragon lineage, such situations were even more common. Although this region was small, there were many dragons with thin bloodlines living in it. Gradually, 4 major factions were formed: Rain Dragons, Cloud Dragons, Coiling Dragons, and WIRM Dragons. Fights and killings often broke out between the 4 great dragon clans. However, in the past few days, the fighting and killing between the 4 great dragon clans had decreased by a lot. It was all because there was an outsider in their territory. Most importantly, this outsider was not qualified to set foot on this land. Even the WM dragons could not accept this person. This person was a WM and was far from a true W. Although the 2 were only separated by a single word, they were worlds apart. However, the many dragons here heard that not only did this outsider set foot in this place, he even enjoyed the primordial divine spring that they were not qualified to enjoy. This caused many dragons to be even more displeased. For the past few days, every Void Reversion dragon, be it the Rain, Cloud, Coiling, or WRM dragons, would have someone teach that outsider a lesson and they would never get tired of it. Without strength, he was not qualified to live with them. Dragons did not live with snakes. This was the pride of dragons. In their eyes, the WM was a snake. Dragon lairs were built around a towering mountain peak. Every dragon cave was extremely spacious and tall, providing a place for dragons to rest and cultivate. At that moment, many dragons were gathered in front of a dragon lair. There were close to 100 people from the Cloud Dragon, Coiling Dragon, Flood Dragon, and Rain Dragon lineages. Whose turn to teach that person a lesson? It's WM Dragon's turn? I'll do it. A young man in white robes stood out. He had a strong physique and rubbed his palms together. There was a smile on his face and his expression was relaxed as he walked towards the dragon cave. Hey, don't beat him to death. We Cloud Dragons have many clansmen who are waiting to train with him. A dragon shouted with a smile. Unknowingly, a scarlet-haired man had appeared in the crowd. He had delicate features and a fair face. The scarlet-haired man patted the dragon on the shoulder and asked, if this WM were to cultivate in his lair, you guys wouldn't be able to get him to come out, right? Although dragons could fight and kill as they pleased, there were restrictions. If a dragon were to cultivate in their own lair, the other dragons could not disturb them. The other dragons could only challenge dragons after they left their lair. Foo-foo. The dragon laughed. Brother, you're talking about the rules of us dragons. However, the one inside is a W. What right does he have to live here? If he hides inside and refuses to come out, we'll naturally enter and drag him out. When he heard that, the scarlet-haired man was expressionless, but his gaze turned colder. The dragon tribe cultivator saw that this person was a little unfamiliar and wanted to ask, but when this person looked at him, his aura weakened and he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. This was a suppression that came from his bloodline. Someone from the Zhu Dragons? The dragon noticed the scarlet-haired man's hair and frowned slightly, thinking to himself, something's amiss. This person looks like someone from the Zhu Dragons. Why do I feel like his bloodline is impure? Although he was puzzled, the dragon did not dare to ask. Standing beside the scarlet-haired man, he felt his heart palpitate, as though a calamity could befall him at any moment. The scarlet-haired man was Su Zimo. He was puzzled when he heard about Solitary Cloud's situation. Solitary Cloud was weak and could not defeat the dragons here. That was normal. He had not truly transformed into a dragon after all. However, as long as Solitary Cloud continued cultivating in his lair, there was naturally a high chance of him transforming into a dragon in this environment with rich dragon chi. How was Solitary Cloud taught such a terrible lesson? When he heard the dragon's reply, Su Zimo finally understood that the dragons here did not give Solitary Cloud a chance to cultivate at all. In their eyes, Solitary Cloud was nothing more than a plaything. Solitary Cloud, get the hell out. The white-robed young man declared, don't think that you'll be safe just because you're hiding in the lair. You're a WM and aren't fit to live here. Go in and drag him out. Many dragons in the crowd jeered. The white-robed young man was about to barge in when a figure gradually appeared from the darkness of the lair. It became clearer and staggered. When the figure stood in the lair of the dragon, Su Zimo narrowed his eyes and his heart ached. That figure was none other than Solitary Cloud. However, Solitary Cloud's appearance was almost indistinguishable. His cheeks were swollen from the beating and his facial features were contorted with wounds all over his body. Some of them had just scabbed over and his movements tugged at his wounds, causing fresh blood to flow out once more. Solitary Cloud looked wretched and miserable with wounds all over his body. However, there was a hint of fearlessness, determination, and pride in his eyes. Is it your turn today? Solitary Cloud's lips twitched as though he wanted to laugh. The wounds on his face tore open and fresh blood flowed out, making him look menacing. Come on. Solitary Cloud's voice was hoarse and unpleasant as he let out a deep growl from the depths of his throat, as though he was letting out an unyielding cry to all the dragons. The white-robed young man said indifferently, I'll pass another message on behalf of our young master. As long as you agree to become the mount of our young master, we WM dragons will naturally step forward to protect you. Absolutely impossible. Solitary Cloud snarled word by word without hesitation. Fufu. The white-robed young man sneered, Solitary Cloud, you're only a W. The fact that our young master is willing to take you in as a mount is already giving you face. Don't ask for trouble. Your young master is not fit. Solitary Cloud smirked. You must have a death wish. The white-robed young man's expression darkened. In a flash, he arrived before Solitary Cloud instantly and opened his gigantic palm, slapping Solitary Cloud's face viciously. Solitary Cloud could not even stand properly in his current state. There was no way he could defend against that attack. All of a sudden, a gentle breeze blew. There was another person in front of Solitary Cloud. The white-robed young man's palm was gripped by that person motionlessly. Who did you say had a death wish? The person had a calm expression as he looked at the white-robed young man and asked indifferently. Chapter 1072. A series of exclamations sounded from the dragons. Nobody noticed how the scarlet-haired man appeared. The dragons watched as the white-robed young man's palm was about to land on Solitary Cloud's face when a figure appeared between the two of them. Furthermore, the white-robed young man's wrist was gripped tightly. It's that dragon from earlier on. One of the dragons recognized the scarlet-haired man who was talking to him just now. Candle dragons? I think so, but their bloodlines are impure. It looks like they just broke through. A series of discussions sounded from the dragons. The white-robed young man's expression changed starkly. Even he did not manage to see how the intruder appeared. Instinctively, he tried to retract his arm but realized that the intruder's palm was like a steel hoop that locked his wrist tightly and he could not move at all. Who are you? The white-robed young man asked sternly. All of a sudden, the white-robed young man's expression changed and he cried out in pain. Suddenly, he felt that the intruder's palm was gradually increasing in strength. Waves of pain shot through his wrist and his bones were about to be crushed. Answer my question, who are you saying has a death wish? Su Zimo asked coldly. The white-robed young man endured the pain and let out a dragon roar from the depths of his throat. He swung his other arm and smashed it towards Su Zimo's head. Sniff. Su Zimo exerted strength in his palm. The white-robed young man's wrist was snapped. Thereafter, he raised his palm gently and slapped the white-robed young man's cheek, sending the latter flying dozens of feet away and rolling in front of the dragon formation. The dragons were in an uproar. The white-robed young man was covered in dust and his wrist was broken. Half of his face was smashed and he coughed out large mouthfuls of blood. He had already fainted. With a single slap, the intruder severely injured a void reversion W. For you, I've seen all the void reversion dragons of the Illumination Dragon lineage, but I've never seen you before. Many dragons stood out with sharp expressions and ferocious gazes. They exuded killing intent and questioned Su Zimo loudly. If they saw the white-robed young man suffering such serious injuries, the surrounding cultivators in the cultivation world would definitely have scruples. However, in the Dragon Clan, such scenes were already commonplace for the dragons. Such a scene could not suppress the dragons at all. Master, you've come. Solitary Cloud looked at the back view before him and felt his heart lighten. Finally, he smiled and relaxed completely. He had only stayed in the primordial divine spring for less than 7 days. For the next 20 days, he was tortured by the dragons every day. He had no time to rest or cultivate. His spirit was on the verge of collapse. If it weren't for Su Zimo in his heart, he probably wouldn't have been able to hold on. At this moment, when he saw Su Zimo appear, he completely relaxed. Solitary Cloud knew that as long as Su Zimo was here, even the 5 dragons would not be able to hurt him, let alone the 4 dragons of the mixed dragon lineage. Against the questioning of the dragons, Su Zimo's expression was indifferent as he ignored them completely. Turning around, he supported Solitary Cloud to the dragon lair and sat down. Eat these elixirs. They'll help with your injuries. Su Zimo took out many bottles and jars from his storage bag and placed them in Solitary Cloud's embrace. Suppressing the anger in his heart, he whispered, "Watch here. I'll help you vent your anger." All right. Solitary Cloud did not say anything else and nodded vigorously. "I know you're another outsider. You're Long Mo of the Illumination Dragons." Right then, a young man from the Coiling Dragon lineage stood out from the dragons and pointed at Su Zimo. "Your bloodline is impure and you're not fit to be in the same group as us." Long Mo, so it's him. I heard that he only entered because of the recommendation of the old clan leader of the Illumination Dragon lineage. He's not qualified at all. That's right. What right does a Illumination Dragon with an impure bloodline have to enjoy the primordial divine spring? Long Mo, I want to challenge you. The young man from the Coiling Dragons shouted with a murderous aura and a burning gaze. Su Zimo turned around and surveyed his surroundings. Nodding, he said, all right. Come at me together, I'll take all of you." He was challenging more than 100 dragons alone. Arrogant. Insolent. The dragons sneered and berated. The young man from the Coiling Dragons sneered, "Foo-foo, the fight between dragons can only be fought one-on-one. If you want us to be punished for violating the rules of the clan, there's no need to embarrass yourself with such scheming." Su Zimo roamed the cultivation world and very few people of the same cultivation realm dared to fight him one-on-one. He was already used to fighting against many alone. To think that there would be such a rule among the dragons. Of course, this was also the pride of the dragons. All right, Su Zimo nodded. Next. The moment Su Zimo said the word next, his figure flashed and he arrived before the young man from the Coiling Dragons. The moment the word next was said, Su Zimo attacked. Under the stunned gazes of the Coiling Dragons, a punch struck his chest heavily. The word next was said. The young man from the Coiling Dragons had already fallen far away and his chest caved in deeply. He coughed out large mouthfuls of blood. "I'll do it." A young man from the Rain Dragons stood forward. Without another word, Su Zimo strode forward and raised his palm. Spreading his fingers, it was as though he could blot out the skies as he suppressed the young man from the Rain Dragons. An extremely bitter aura surged toward them. The young man from the Rain Dragons felt suffocated against that aura. It's way too terrifying. There's no way to defend against it. That was the only thought in the young man's mind. Instinctively, he raised his arms and blocked. Bang! Su Zimo's palm landed on the arms of the rain dragons. Snap! Without stopping at all, the sound of bones cracking could be heard. The young man from the rain dragon's arms were snapped into two and his broken bones were revealed. They were stained with blood and were a shocking sight. Su Zimo's palm did not run out of strength as it landed on the person's head and rubbed gently. The young man from the rain dragons fainted on the spot. Under the gazes of the dragons, Su Zimo merely raised his palm and pressed down, causing a rain dragon to faint. Su Zimo said indifferently, "Next." Kill. A young man from the cloud dragons appeared and arrived in front of Su Zimo. He reached out with both hands and sharp fingernails popped out, grabbing towards Su Zimo's face. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged as he ignored the young man from the cloud dragon's fingernails. He merely extended his palm and suppressed it. A ruthless glint flashed through the eyes of the young man from the cloud dragons. His fingernails were incomparably sharp and were comparable to divine weapons. In fact, they could even penetrate divine stones. Long Mo's attempt to defend against his fingernails with his body was akin to an egg striking a rock. Crack, crack, crack. Before the young man from the cloud dragons could finish his thought, his fingernails had already been snapped by Su Zimo's palm. 10 fingers connected to the heart. The young man from the cloud dragons shrieked tragically. In a flash, he turned into a gigantic cloud on the spot and seemed to have vanished into the clouds. That was the secret skill of the cloud dragons. By releasing this cloud of mist, their true bodies would be hidden within and become one with the mist. It would be very difficult for the enemy to detect their true bodies. Su Zimo did not retract his palm at all and extended it into the clouds. A figure fell out of the clouds. It was the young man from the cloud dragons. His chest was mangled and his organs were shaken. He had already fainted completely. Next. Su Zimo's voice sounded coldly and calmly. Chapter 1073. This, isn't it too easy? The dragons gradually realized that Long Mo's strength might be even more terrifying than they had imagined. The secret skill of the cloud dragons, Mistlock, was like a decoration in the eyes of Long Mo and was seen through with a single glance. Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. It was no exaggeration to say that even the legacy cultivation techniques of the primordial 9 races could not compare to it. Although there were no visual techniques in the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, his eyesight was so strong that he could see through most illusions. Furthermore, Su Zimo's true body cultivated the illumination dragon eye and possessed the illumination stone in his right eye. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Without any warning, a dark cloud floated above Su Zimo's head and rain poured down. The raindrops were like needles and swords as they fell densely towards Su Zimo. A young man from the rain dragons attacked. However, he did not head forward to fight Su Zimo in melee combat. Instead, he stood not far away and released the rain dragon's secret skill. Humph! Su Zimo raised his head and looked over with clear eyes. Against the falling raindrops, he was fearless and suddenly hollered, "Disperse!" Boom! His voice was like thunder. The dark clouds that hovered above Su Zimo's head dispersed and the pouring rain seemed to have sensed something as well as they dodged in fear. The dense raindrops fell but not a single drop landed on Su Zimo's body. The dragons were shocked. Long Mo did not move at all. He merely hollered and the secret skill of the rain dragons dissipated into thin air. What sort of method was that? Bloodline suppression? That was impossible. Even the dragons of the 5 lineages did not have such a terrifying bloodline. Furthermore, Long Mo's bloodline was impure. How could there be such a phenomenon? The young man from the rain dragons was shocked as he stood rooted to the ground with a blank mind. Su Zimo's expression was calm as usual. With one hand behind his back, he had already strode in front of the young man and pressed down with his palm. Bang! The rain dragon's youth's body trembled violently. The clothes on his chest were torn apart, and a huge palm print appeared. His entire body was sent flying. His muscles and bones were shattered, and he lay on the ground, unable to stand up. In fact, although Su Zimo's heart was filled with anger, he still maintained his rationality. He didn't kill him. Among the dragons, other than the dragon blood battlefield, fighting to the death in other areas was not allowed. However, Su Zimo's attack was extremely heavy. Even with the powerful bloodline of dragons, it would take at least 10 days to half a month to recover from such injuries. For a moment, the dragons were stunned. However, Su Zimo did not stop. He walked towards the dragons leisurely and extended his palm again, suppressing a young man with a coiling dragon. This time, it was Su Zimo's turn to take the initiative. The young man with the coiling dragons was enraged. Although he was stunned by Su Zimo's methods, he could not tolerate such provocation. Suddenly, the young man with the coiling dragons opened his mouth and spat out a pitch-black mist. The mist carried a thick stench, and the moment it was exposed, it let out a series of sizzling sounds. Even the spirit chi in the air was corroded by the mist. The bloodline of the coiling dragons contained poison, and they were adept at using poison. However, he did not realize what sort of existence he was facing. Given the bloodline of the true body of the dragons, that poison could not threaten Su Zimo at all. Su Zimo passed through the pitch-black mist, and his palm did not stop at all. He pressed down and sent the young man with the coiling dragons flying. The young man with the coiling dragons spat out a mouthful of black blood and fainted on the spot. Su Zimo barged into the group of dragons. Wherever he passed, flesh and blood splattered and the dragons were sent flying. None of them could stop him. In the blink of an eye, half of the 100-odd dragons were crippled by Su Zimo. If this was the cultivation world outside, the remaining cultivators would have dispersed long ago if they encountered such a situation. However, among the dragons, even the 4 dragons with thin bloodlines did not retreat. The outcome of not retreating was a bloody suppression. Su Zimo placed one hand behind his back and only used a single move. He extended his palm and suppressed the other party. But even with such a move, not a single one of the 100 dragons was able to block it. He crushed them the entire way. None of the dragons blocking Solitary Cloud's lair were innocent. All of them had bullied Solitary Cloud before. In the blink of an eye, the 100-odd dragons were suppressed by Su Zimo. They either fainted completely. They either lay on the ground and screamed from time to time. It was unstoppable. Blood chi surged on the battlefield. Apart from Su Zimo, the only one who could stand on the spot was a young man with a WRM bloodline. Su Zimo arrived before that person and looked at him expressionlessly with a calm gaze without saying a word. The two of them were extremely close. The young man with a WM bloodline was pale and his arms trembled slightly. He was already drenched in sweat. Although he had the dignity of a dragon, it was impossible for him to not feel fear in the face of such a situation. The two of them stood face to face, and the young man with a WM bloodline did not dare to raise his head to look at them. Against Su Zimo's terrifying aura, that person lowered his head and could not move at all. In fact, he even had the urge to kneel on the ground. The person before him evoked the fear in the depths of his soul and bloodline. He could not control himself. At that moment, the commotion here had already alarmed many dragons of the mixed dragon lineage. In fact, not far away, the figures of the 5 lineage dragons appeared. Right in front of everyone, the young man with a WRM bloodline suddenly knelt down. His body was trembling uncontrollably, as though he was enduring immense fear and pressure. That scene caused an uproar among the dragons. It was one thing to suppress a group of dragons. However, it was another thing to force a WRM to kneel with his hands behind his back. Exclamation point. A dragon spat with a disdainful expression and sneered, "How embarrassing! Even if he can't win, he can't kneel. The dignity of dragons is not to be blasphemed." In my opinion, this WRM won't be able to survive in the future. He's definitely going to be bullied to death by the other WMs. When he heard the voices from the dragons, the young man with a WM bloodline felt bitter in his heart. If he did not stand opposite the scarlet-haired man, he would never be able to feel that terrifying pressure. He could not defend against it at all. The feeling that the scarlet-haired man gave him was even scarier than the dragons of the 5 lineages. "Do you know why I didn't suppress you?" Su Zimo asked indifferently. I don't know." The young man with a WM bloodline shuddered and paused for a moment. Su Zimo said, "Go back and get your young master dragons to come and see me." Although his tone was calm, it was filled with an unquestionable domineering aura. Yes. For some reason, the young man with a WRM bloodline could only agree instinctively. As though he had been pardoned, he stood up and did not even dare to turn around. He merely lowered his head and retreated slowly. After dozens of feet, he turned and left in a hurry. Chapter 1074. Not far away, a few candle dragons stood there with fiery scarlet hair and arrogant expressions as they watched everything calmly. Interesting. The young man in the lead, a candle dragons, smirked and murmured softly. An illumination dragon behind him frowned slightly and said in a deep voice, "Brother Chio, this long emo seems to be a little troublesome." A look of disdain flashed through the eyes of the young candle dragons called Long Chio as he said indifferently, "It's nothing much to bully some mixed dragons." That's right. Another illumination dragon sneered. "With such a huge commotion here, the young masters of the 4 mixed blood dragons will definitely appear. If this long emo can't even get past the young masters of the 4 mixed blood dragons, he's not worthy of our brother Chio making a move." On the other side, there were also dragons and horned dragons who had just followed over from the primordial divine spring. This long emo is quite capable. If that's all he has, it's nothing much. Although Su Zimo pushed his way through and suppressed more than 100 dragons, his combat strength was nothing in the eyes of the 5 lineages dragons. The dragons of the 5 lineages all possessed such strength as well. However, the dragons did not know that the combat strength Su Zimo displayed just now was less than 30% of his true strength. The mixed dragons surrounding him no longer advanced. If Su Zimo could suppress more than 100 dragons single-handedly, they would only be tortured if they went forward. On the battlefield, no one went forward to the dragons that were strewn all over the ground. More and more dragons gathered here. All the dragons knew that this matter could only come to an end when the young master of the flood dragon lineage arrived. Su Zimo returned to Solitary Cloud's side and whispered, "Sorry, I'm late." "Master, what are you talking about?" Solitary Cloud smiled. "You don't know how excited I was when I walked out of the primordial divine spring and found out that I was in the Dragon Bone Valley. No matter what kind of torture I suffer here, I won't regret it." Su Zimo nodded and said, "Among these dragons, strength is everything. There is a limit to how much I can help you. If you want to gain a foothold here, you have to rely on yourself." Su Zimo did not make a move because Solitary Cloud had lost to the dragons and the others. It was normal to lose to a group of dragons because one's skills were inferior. What infuriated Su Zimo was that the dragons here did not give Solitary Cloud a chance to cultivate and become stronger. The dragons did not even give Solitary Cloud time to recuperate. This wasn't fair. Since this place was unfair, he would create a fair environment for Solitary Cloud. "Don't worry, Master." Solitary Cloud had a resolute gaze. "As long as I'm given the time to cultivate, I'll definitely be able to transform into a dragon." After pausing for a moment, Solitary Cloud's gaze landed on the side of the 5 lineage dragons not far away. With a grave expression, he said in a low voice, "Master, the people from the 5 lineage dragons are here. Things seem to have gotten out of hand." "I'm fine." Su Zimo glanced sideways indifferently before retracting his gaze. As long as those dragons did not cause trouble for him, he could not be bothered. Time passed slowly. It was not only the mixed dragons. Many dragons from the 5 lineages rushed over as well. Countless gazes landed on Su Zimo, most of them filled with hostility. Anyone with a weaker heart would not be able to withstand being surrounded by dragons. Even though Solitary Cloud sat behind Su Zimo, he still felt uneasy. He was a WM. Even if he was stared at by a single dragon, he would feel immense pressure, let alone being stared at by a group of dragons. However, Su Zimo was calm and composed, merely closing his eyes to regulate his breathing. Right then, a commotion broke out among the dragons. The dragons dispersed and a group of dragons in brocade robes strode in. The 4 people in the lead had sharp gazes and emitted terrifying auras. The 4 young masters are here. There's going to be a show. Young Master WM is at the perfected void reversion realm and is half a step into the Dharma characteristic realm. Long Mo's bloodline is impure and I reckon he won't be able to last more than 10 moves. The dragons were invigorated and discussed fervently. Su Zimo opened his eyes and stood up slowly. Which one of you is young Master W? Su Zimo's expression was cold as he scanned the 4 young masters of the dragons opposite him and asked indifferently. A blue-robed young man in the middle stood out and grinned slightly, revealing a row of pearly white teeth. He exuded a ferocious aura and grinned sinisterly. The other 3 young masters crossed their arms and watched coldly from the sidelines. Oh, Su Zimo raised his brow and asked, I heard that you want to subdue Solitary Cloud as your mount? That's right. It's his honor to be my mount. The young master of the dragons sneered. Why? Do you have a problem with that? Yes, Su Zimo nodded and said slowly, he's my mount. If you want to subdue him, you'll have to ask for my opinion first. All right. The young master of the dragons gripped his fists and twisted his neck. The sounds of bones cracking could be heard from his body as he said coldly with a ferocious glint in his eyes, if you have an opinion, I'll beat you up until you don't. Boom. The bloodline of the young master of the dragons burst forth, and he stomped heavily on the ground. Bursting forth with immense power, he charged towards Su Zimo. There was no need for nonsense between dragons. All of them were decisive in killing. Boom. Su Zimo had a calm expression and merely took a step forward. However, an even louder bang sounded. Plow heaven stride. The ground trembled. The surrounding dragons were caught off guard, and their bodies swayed slightly. With the plow heaven stride, a torrential aura burst forth from Su Zimo's body and suppressed the young master of the dragons instantly. The expression of the young master of the dragons changed. The moment he arrived in front of Su Zimo, he felt a terrifying aura surge towards him, and his mind shuddered. This man seems to be quite capable. The moment that thought flashed through the young master of the dragons, he felt his vision darken. Swoosh! An evil gust of wind blew. Su Zimo reached out and spread his fingers, covering the skies and creating a huge shadow that shrouded the top of his head and suppressed him. The aura was tragic. The young master of the dragons trembled slightly. He finally realized how the 100-odd dragons were defeated previously. The pressure was way too great. This was an absolute suppression in terms of bloodline and strength. The young master of the dragons reared his head and roared into the skies. He channeled his bloodline to its limits and punched out fiercely against Su Zimo's palm. Boom! The fist and palm collided with a deafening bang. Su Zimo was motionless with a calm expression. After a brief pause, blood drained from the face of the young master of the dragons. Crack, 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 crack. The sound of bones cracking could be heard from his arms. The clothes on his arms were torn. Under the pressure of that terrifying power, the flesh on his arms exploded into clouds of blood mist. Bang! The young master of the dragons fell heavily to the ground, creating a huge pit. The dragons were shocked. Even the 5 Meridian dragons frowned. A single move. The young master of the dragons, who was already half a step into the Dharma characteristic realm, could not even defend against a single palm strike from Long Mo. There was no need for any technique. This was absolute bloodline suppression. Chapter 1075. To be fair, the bloodline derived from Su Zimo's cultivation of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness was even stronger than the purest illumination dragon bloodline. The young master before him could not even compare to the bloodline of the illumination dragons. How could he fight against Su Zimo? Su Zimo was able to suppress the young master of the WM dragons with ease with his physical strength alone. The young master of the WM dragon's arms were broken and his flesh was mangled. He struggled to stand up and glared fiercely at Su Zimo. Although he was defeated, he would never admit defeat. The reason why he could become the young master of the WRM dragons was because he had fought his way up and had encountered situations even more tragic than this. This bit of injury was nothing to him. Now that he was defeated this time round, he would naturally cultivate even more desperately and work hard to become a member of the 5 lineages dragons. As long as the dragons of the mixed lineage were strong enough, they had a chance of passing the test of the 5 lineages and becoming a member of the 5 lineages. Of course, this test was extremely dangerous. For the past 10,000 years, there were less than 10 mixed dragons who could pass this test, and their lives were at risk. Good. The young master of the WRM dragons grit his teeth. Longimo, you're indeed capable. I'll remember today's humiliation. I'll definitely challenge you in the future. Today's matter isn't over. Su Zimo pointed in front of Solitary Cloud and said indifferently, "Come and apologize." Ha! Although the young master of the WRM dragons was severely injured, he reared his head in laughter as though he had heard the greatest joke in the world. Apologize? The young master of the WRM dragons had a mocking gaze as he said coldly, "Longimo, although I've been defeated, there's no way you can make me bow down. It's not up to you in front of me." When Su Zimo saw that the young master of the WRM dragons was still extremely arrogant, he could not help but harumph coldly. He strode forward and reached out, gripping the young master of the WRM dragons by the neck and lifting him up. The young master of the dragons was strong, but Su Zimo carried him like he was carrying a chick. He turned around and came before Solitary Cloud. "Kneel down and apologize." Su Zimo's tone was calm but unquestionable. "In your dreams." The young master of the dragons spat out a mouthful of blood. His gaze was ferocious, and there was no fear in his eyes. Bang, bang. Su Zimo stretched out the tip of his foot and lightly tapped the young dragon's knees. Both of his knees were instantly fractured. But the young dragons could no longer hold it in. He let out a blood-curdling scream, his legs went soft, and he fell to his knees. There was no pity in Su Zimo's eyes. Compared to Solitary Cloud's injuries, this was nothing. Fortunately, Solitary Cloud's life was not in danger. If anything happened to Solitary Cloud, Su Zimo would dare to go on a killing spree even in the Dragon Bone Valley. Su Zimo's expression was cold. Right in front of everyone, he pressed the young master of the dragon's head down towards the ground. The young master of the dragon's face flushed red. No matter how he channeled his bloodline, he could not withstand the pressure above his head. He could only watch helplessly as his face got closer and closer to the ground. Humiliation. It was a humiliation that he had never experienced before. The young master of the dragon's heart was filled with endless indignance. Su Zimo's actions were not only to make the young master of the dragons apologize, he also wanted the mixed dragons to watch. He did not care about a fair fight with Solitary Cloud. However, if they wanted to bully others with their strength, the young master of the dragons would be their outcome. Longimo, aren't you going overboard? Right then, the young master of the cloud dragons stood out and glared at Su Zimo with a fighting spirit in his eyes without any fear. The young master of the dragons felt the pressure on his head lighten and could not help but be delighted. Finally, someone stood out. Su Zimo released his grip and turned to look. Nodding, he said, "Since you've taken the initiative to stand out, it saves me the trouble of looking for you." Before he could finish his sentence, Su Zimo's figure flashed and a series of afterimages appeared behind him. In the blink of an eye, he arrived before the young master of the cloud dragons. "You kneel down as well?" Su Zimo hollered and reached out with his gigantic palm, grabbing towards the young master of the cloud dragons. The young master of the cloud dragon's expression changed. When Su Zimo charged over, he realized that the difference in strength between the two of them was too great and there was no way he could take it head-on. Swoosh! The young master of the cloud dragons spat out a gigantic cloud and vanished. Compared to the cloud dragons just now, the secret skill released by the young master of the cloud dragons was clearly much more brilliant. Su Zimo was shrouded by the cloud and his spirit consciousness, vision and hearing were severely affected. The young master of the cloud dragon's movements were erratic and could already hide from his senses. Anyone who could become the young master of a race was definitely not ordinary. Su Zimo's expression was calm. He had many methods to counter that secret skill. However, at that moment, he was motionless and even closed his eyes. All of a sudden, Su Zimo opened his eyes and two divine lights burst forth. Suddenly, he moved horizontally and leaned in that direction. Bang! It was as though he was defeated. A figure fell out of the cloud and spat out blood. Half of his body was smashed and he looked miserable. It was the young master of the cloud dragons. 2 moves. Even the young master of the cloud dragons who released his secret skill could only withstand 2 moves. Among Su Zimo's many methods, the simplest and easiest was to rely on his spirit perception. Unless the young master of the cloud dragons could hold back and not attack him. Otherwise, as long as the young master of the cloud dragons made any strange movements, Su Zimo would sense it immediately. No matter how strong the concealment of the secret skill was, Su Zimo would be able to find his true body. The clouds dispersed and Su Zimo's figure appeared. He lifted the young master of the cloud dragons and threw him beside the young master of the WM dragons casually. The moment the young master of the WM dragons was delighted, he realized that the young master of the cloud dragons was thrown over as well. Bang! Bang! Su Zimo repeated the same thing and tapped the knees of the young master of the cloud dragons with his toes, making him kneel in front of Solitary Cloud as well. The 2 young masters had terrible expressions and their eyes spewed fire. Under the gazes of so many dragons, this action could be said to have caused them to lose all face. The young master of the coiling dragons and the young master of the rain dragons had terrible expressions as well. They had already vaguely realized something. However, given their status, there was no way they could retreat under such circumstances. They had never imagined that they would actually provoke such a terrifying existence. Su Zimo turned around and walked towards the 2 young masters, saying calmly, "The 2 of you, kneel here as well." The expressions of the 2 young masters changed slightly. True enough. Long Emo actually wanted the 4 young masters to kneel here and apologize to Solitary Cloud. Long Emo, don't go overboard. The young master of the coiling dragons said sternly. I should be the one saying that to you guys. Su Zimo strode forward and did not waste time talking to the young master of the coiling dragons. He attacked right away and suppressed the young master of the coiling dragons. Before the young master of the coiling dragons could react, he was severely injured by Su Zimo's punch and fell. The difference was too great. The young master of the rain dragons was not spared either. He only lasted for 2 breaths before collapsing to the ground with severe injuries. In the blink of an eye, the 4 young masters were suppressed by Su Zimo. Su Zimo swept through the mixed dragon lineage domineeringly. Chapter 1076. Most of the dragons looked at Su Zimo with reverence in their eyes. Strength reigned supreme among dragons. If one wanted to obtain the recognition of the dragons, they had to rely on their strength. From today onwards, at the very least, most of the dragons that Su Zimo came to the region of the mixed dragon lineage would not dare to provoke him anymore. Su Zimo carried the young masters of the rain and coiling dragons to Solitary Cloud and shattered their knees, forcing them to kneel. Although the 4 young masters were defeated, they refused to lower their heads. In their eyes, Long Emo would not be smug for long. They had excellent eyesight and had long seen the dragons of the 5 lineages arrive. Not far away, there were even illumination dragons watching the battle. They had long heard the news that many illumination dragons were waiting for Long Emo to leave the primordial divine spring to teach him a lesson. The 4 young masters believed that the illumination dragons watching the battle would definitely not stand by idly now that they were defeated. At that time, it would be the end of Long Emo. The bloodline power of the illumination dragon lineage was much stronger than theirs and was not something that Long Emo with an impure bloodline could compare to. Right then, a few illumination dragons who were watching the battle not far away walked over. The 4 dragons were invigorated and the pain on their bodies seemed to have lessened. Fifth. Not far away, the sound of clapping could be heard. Long Chio of the illumination dragon lineage strode over with a relaxed expression. The corners of his lips curled as he said mockingly, Long Emo, you're truly impressive. You swept through the mixed dragon lineage after a month in the Dragon Bone Valley. Ha! His bloodline is impure. I reckon he can only vent his anger on a few mixed dragons. Behind Long Chiu, the few illumination dragons roared in laughter. The dragon clan had always been filled with great hostility towards outsiders. Furthermore, this outsider's bloodline was impure and he even enjoyed the primordial divine spring that many dragons were not qualified to enjoy. The reason why Su Zimo was so domineering was because etiquette and rules were useless among the dragons. If he wanted to gain a foothold, he had to display absolute strength. What's the matter? Su Zimo was expressionless. When he saw that it was someone from the Illumination Dragon lineage, he ignored them on account of his relationship with the red-headed ghost. Furthermore, the Illumination Dragon lineage had not done anything overboard to Solitary Cloud. You want to avenge your mount? That's not bad at all. Long Chiu raised his chin and said coldly, but don't forget, this is the place of dragons. Your mount is a ferocious flood dragon. No matter how strong you are, you can't change his fate. Fate? Su Zimo sneered. He never believed in fate. If he had believed in fate, he wouldn't have been able to live to this day. He didn't want to pay any attention to these dragons of the candle, nor did he want to get into a conflict with them. Su Zimo surveyed his surroundings and looked at the dragons before saying in a deep voice, the reason why I'm attacking this time round is not for anything else but to fight for a fair opportunity for Solitary Cloud. It doesn't matter what bloodline he has or what race he is. He has come here and obtained a dragon's lair. This means that he has already obtained the approval of the dragons. I don't care if you guys fight with Solitary Cloud. Pausing for a moment, Su Zimo continued, however, if he's cultivating in the dragon's lair, you guys can't disturb him. That's the bottom line. This will be the outcome of anyone who dares to cross that bottom line. With that said, Su Zimo slammed the heads of the four young masters onto the ground with a backhand slap. Bang! They knelt and kowtowed. Long Chiu and the others' expressions darkened when they saw that. Su Zimo's disregard enraged them. Long Emo, you still have the mood to care about others? Long Chiu's gaze was cold as he said slowly, you're merely a bastard with an impure bloodline. If you want to establish yourself among the dragons of the candle, you'll have to get through me first. Su Zimo frowned slightly. He had given in repeatedly, but the other party was forcing him. He did not want to get into a conflict with the Illumination Dragon lineage because of the red-headed ghost and his bloodline. However, it was not his fault that Long Chiu was blind. Bastard? Su Zimo nodded. Don't blame me for what happens if you dare to speak to me like that. Su Zimo stomped his feet and the ground trembled. Long Chiu channeled his bloodline and his aura expanded. He stood on the ground motionlessly and sneered, insignificant tricks. Before he could finish his sentence, Su Zimo had already attacked. Swoosh! A gigantic palm enveloped down, causing the air to explode and a shadow to cover the skies. A tragic aura surged in a suffocating manner. Long Chiu watched from the side and was already prepared for Su Zimo's move. He raised his arms and his bloodline surged. The flesh on his arms expanded and his clothes tore. The muscles on his muscular arms were intertwined and emitted a scorching aura, as though they were two gigantic iron rods that were burning red. Long Chiu exhaled and raised his arms to block Su Zimo's palm. Bang! Both sides collided head-on. A heat wave surged and burst forth rapidly, spreading in all directions. Su Zimo was motionless and his scarlet hair fluttered. However, Long Chiu's expression changed slightly as he staggered 3 steps back. He was actually at a disadvantage in the first exchange between the two of them. This time round, the dragons finally realized how terrifying Long Mo was. It was nothing much to be able to suppress the mixed dragons. However, if he could fight against dragons of the 5 lineages, he was indeed supported by immense strength. Long Chiu retreated 3 steps back but burst into laughter. Long Mo, that's all there is to your palm strike. Long Chiu smiled. Although I took 3 steps back, do you know that I only used 80% of my strength to defend against your palm strike? If I release 100% of my strength, you'll definitely be defeated. Su Zimo raised his brow. He did not care how much strength Long Qiu used. He only knew that he only used 30% of his strength for that palm strike earlier on. Since that's the case, take another palm strike from me. Su Zimo strode forward and extended his palm once more to suppress. Swoosh! An evil wind blew. Long Qiu reared his head and roared into the skies, releasing a loud and clear dragon roar that reverberated through the world. Immediately after, Long Qiu's body expanded and he tore his clothes apart. His bloodline was pushed to its limits and scarlet dragon scales appeared on his body one after another. Under normal circumstances, apart from fighting in the dragon blood battlefield, one was not allowed to transform into a complete dragon form in other regions. However, Long Qiu did not violate the rules of the dragons before him. His current state was similar to Su Zimo's dragonification in the past. He could only be considered as a half-dragon. Among dragons, there were two stages to dragonification. The first stage was the half-dragon form and the second stage was the complete dragon form. Long Qiu's tone was filled with disdain. However, he did not dare to be careless against Su Zimo. After a single exchange, he transformed into his half-dragon form and was prepared to release 100% of his strength to defend against Su Zimo's palm strike. A roar burst forth from the depths of Long Qiu's throat as he strode forward and raised his arms to defend against the incoming palm. Bang! There was a deafening sound. The two of them maintained that posture motionlessly, as though they were frozen. After a brief pause, a series of crackling sounds could be heard from within Long Qiu's body. His bones seemed to have fallen apart. Exclamation point! Long Qiu spat out a mouthful of blood. Under the tremendous pressure, streaks of blood seeped out of the gaps between the dragon scales on his body. Su Zimo had only used 50% of his strength and he could not defend against it. Chapter 1077. Even if Su Zimo defeated more than 100 mixed dragons and suppressed the 4 mixed dragon young masters single-handedly, the dragons would only be slightly surprised and not shocked. Dragons of the mixed dragon lineage had a thin bloodline and their combat strength was far inferior to the 5 lineage dragons. But now, Long Qiu of the Illumination Dragon lineage was suppressed so easily by Long Mo. That was what truly shocked the dragons. Dragons had terrifying bloodlines and strong physiques. Most of them fought in melee combat. However, Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, and his most terrifying aspect was his melee combat strength. Coupled with his true body of dragons, he could be said to be invincible. Many cultivators in the entire cultivation world knew this. However, there were only a few people in the Dragon Bone Valley who knew of Su Zimo's background. If these dragons wanted to gain an advantage in close combat, it was no different from a fool's dream. Up till now, Su Zimo had not even used his bloodline or any melee combat techniques. He was able to crush everything with his physique alone. A death wish. Long Qiu struggled to stand up from the ground with a menacing expression. His eyes surged with endless rage as he glared at Su Zimo fiercely. He had lost to an outsider under the watchful eyes of so many people. This made him feel like he had lost all face. "Brother Qiu, are you all right?" The few illumination dragons behind him looked worried and could not help but ask. "Get lost." Long Qiu pushed everyone away and said coldly, "I haven't lost yet." As long as Long Qiu did not admit defeat, he could indeed continue fighting. However, the dragons could tell that Long Qiu's organs were already shaken. Even if he continued fighting, he would only be asking for trouble. Su Zimo had an indifferent expression. To be fair, Long Qiu's combat strength was definitely not weak. In the cultivation world, he could even compare to the titular disciples. However, that was nothing in Su Zimo's eyes. With the help of the primordial divine spring, his body recovered and he stepped into the void reversion realm. With the pure yang spirit, his combat strength increased exponentially, and it would not be an exaggeration to say that he was invincible in melee combat. Long Qiu was panting heavily as he exhaled a huge stream of air from his mouth and nose. It carried a scorching aura as the fury in his heart burned even more fiercely. Even the few illumination dragons not far away could sense it. Brother Chiu, an illumination dragon's heart sank as he vaguely realized something. He could not help but exclaim softly, wanting to remind Long Chiu to calm down. However, Long Chiu acted as if he didn't hear anything. The torch dragon lineage was of the fire attribute. Most torch dragons had extremely violent fire auras and were impatient by nature. Long Chiu was even more so. Originally, the defeat this time had already made him feel great humiliation. And when he saw Su Zimo's carefree look, it stimulated his heart even more. Contempt. Long Chiu felt that he had never been looked down upon before. He was a dragon. He would never allow an outsider with an impure bloodline to ride on his head. Even if he had to suffer the punishment of the clan's rules, he had to regain his dignity and trample this outsider beneath his feet. The moment that thought was born, it grew wildly in his mind uncontrollably. Roar. Finally, Long Chiu could no longer hold it in and roared into the skies, letting out a loud dragon roar. Dragon scales grew on his face and his head transformed, growing a pair of gigantic scarlet dragon horns that were lofty and majestic. Crackle. A series of crackling sounds could be heard from his body. His body expanded and elongated continuously. In the blink of an eye, Long Chiu had already vanished and transformed into a scarlet illumination dragon that was dozens of feet long. Dragon scales grew densely on the gigantic dragon's body. They were the size of a palm and looked like pieces of red-hot metal, emitting a scorching aura. Long Chiu shook his head and widened his lantern-sized dragon eyes, looking down at Su Zimo, who was as insignificant as an ant on the ground, exuding the might of dragons. This was the complete form of a dragon. Under normal circumstances, apart from the dragon blood battlefield, dragons were not allowed to release their complete dragon forms in the other regions of the Dragon Bone Valley. That was because once a complete dragon form was released, their strength would increase exponentially and their destructive power would be way too terrifying. If they could not control their momentum, dragons would die. This was like a fight between children in the mortal world. Even if they were injured in a bare-handed fight, it would not be a big deal. However, if both parties were to wield sharp sabers, the outcome would be unpredictable. Dragons were rare and difficult to breed. They were not allowed to release their complete dragon forms in private fights. That was the clan's rule. Anyone who violated it would be severely punished. But now that Long Chiu was defeated, the blow he received was too great and he had already lost his rationality. There was only one thought left in his mind, and that was to ruthlessly trample this insignificant outsider under his feet. The dragons were shocked and retreated one after another. If he were to conjure a complete dragon form, there was a high chance that they would be swept into the battle if their dozens of feet-long dragons were to move. Dragons of the 5 lineages were still all right. However, many mixed-blood dragons would be half dead if they were hit by the dozens of feet-long illumination dragon, even if they did not die. The dragon might was as vast as the ocean and surged over. Even the dragons standing in the distance were struck by a sense of trepidation. Many dragons with mixed dragon bloodlines could not defend against that dragon might. However, on the battlefield, Su Zimo's expression was still the same as ever as he stood there quietly. His eyes were as deep as the ocean and his gaze was calm without any ripples. The man and dragon faced each other. Gradually, an illusion appeared in the minds of the dragons. It was as though Long Chiu was not the one looking down at him, but the other way round. Compared to Long Chiu's dragon body, Su Zimo looked incomparably insignificant like a grain of sand. However, for some reason, the dragons felt that way when they saw that. It was an invisible aura. Even if Long Chiu were to conjure a complete dragon form, he would not be a match for Su Zimo's aura. A horned dragon shook his head gently. Long Chiu has lost. On the battlefield, no one knew what Long Chiu was feeling at that moment. Under Su Zimo's gaze, he felt helpless and only wanted to bow his head and transform into his human form once more, lowering his arrogant head. He felt an unimaginable pressure. It was as though doing something as such in front of Long Mo was treason and defiance. Long Qiu hated that feeling. Deep in his heart, he was already panicking. He knew that if he did not attack, he would have to bow down and admit defeat under Su Zimo's gaze. Roar! Long Qiu mustered his courage and let out a deafening roar toward Su Zimo. Noisy! Before the roar was finished, Su Zimo hollered softly and arrived beneath Long Qiu in a flash. He reached out with his gigantic palm and grabbed Long Qiu's tail. Swinging his arm, he smashed the latter towards the ground. Boom! There was a deafening bang. The hearts of the dragons skipped a beat. After the loud bang, there was silence. Dust and gravel flew everywhere on the ground. A moment later, after the dust settled, an illumination dragon covered in injuries lay in a ditch that was more than 100 feet long. His eyes were tightly shut and he was completely unconscious. Chapter 1078. For a long time, there was complete silence near the battlefield. The dragons looked at the figure in the distance as complex emotions welled up in their hearts. This outsider had only stayed in the Dragon Bone Valley for a month and had yet to cultivate the many cultivation techniques of dragons. Furthermore, this outsider's bloodline was impure. However, it was an outsider as such who trampled on the dignity of the dragons in the Dragon Bone Valley. It was hard to imagine how long Mo would grow if he cultivated in the Dragon Bone Valley for more than 100 or 1,000 years. A hornless dragon glanced sideways and whispered to his clansman beside him, "Go back and tell Missy that Long Mo has already left the mountain. Furthermore, he's not weak and is a little troublesome. Tell Missy to be careful." Got it. The clansman turned and left, heading towards the habitat of the hornless dragon lineage. The remaining illumination dragons exchanged glances and nodded in tacit understanding. Without saying anything, they left in a hurry. On the battlefield, Su Zimo could not be bothered with Long Qiu, who was lying on the ground. He did not even know Long Qiu's name. Now that this illumination dragon had released his complete dragon form, there would naturally be an enforcement team of dragons looking for him and punishing him severely. Su Zimo turned around and returned to Solitary Cloud. His gaze shifted and focused on the 4 young masters of the mixed dragon lineage kneeling before him. The young master of the Jiao dragon tribe and the other 3 were still dumbfounded. They had not recovered from the shocking scene just now. Sensing Su Zimo's gaze, the 4 of them snapped to their senses and shuddered. Instantly, they broke out in cold sweat. Previously, the 4 of them refused to submit and bow because, on the one hand, they could not take it lying down. On the other hand, and most importantly, the 4 of them firmly believed that there was definitely someone in the Illumination Dragon lineage who could suppress Long Mo. At that time, there was a high chance that Long Mo would be in an even worse state than them. It was uncertain who would be the laughing stock. However, to think that Long Qiu of the Illumination Dragon lineage would be suppressed by Long Mo so easily. Recalling how they took the initiative to challenge this person just now, the young master of the dragons felt vexed. "Apologize." Su Zimo did not say much and only said 2 words. However, the 4 dragons felt immense pressure. They faintly realized that if they continued persisting, then they would be utterly unable to bear the consequences. "So sorry." The dragon's young master's courage weakened. He lowered his head slightly and said in a low voice. Although the voice was soft, the dragons present had powerful hearing and naturally heard it clearly. The other 3 young masters no longer insisted and apologized one after another. Solitary Cloud gripped his fists tightly and leaned against the cold wall with an agitated expression. However, his heart was burning with passion. The fact that Su Zimo could bring him to Dragon Bone Valley already made him wild with joy. Even if he died here, he would have no regrets. What surprised him even more was that he had earned the respect of the dragons here. Although this kind of respect did not come from the hearts of these dragons. "You can leave now." Su Zimo waved his hand. The 4 young masters' knees were shattered, but they still struggled to stand up. Enduring the pain, they staggered and turned to leave. "Everyone." Su Zimo surveyed his surroundings and said in a deep voice, "Although Solitary Cloud is my mount, I won't stand up for him for no reason. If he were to fight you guys outside the dragon's lair and get injured, it would be because he's not skilled enough and is not strong enough. I won't interfere either. At that point, a commotion broke out among the dragons. Many dragons looked at Solitary Cloud with hostility. This meant that as long as it was a fair battle, they could still teach Solitary Cloud a lesson. Su Zimo turned around and looked at Solitary Cloud. He did not say anything and his eyes were filled with encouragement and trust. Although Su Zimo had saved Solitary Cloud by fighting here, Solitary Cloud would still have to rely on himself if he wanted to establish a foothold in Dragon Bone Valley in the future. The opportunity was right in front of him. Su Zimo had fought for a fair environment for him as well. Whether he could transform into a dragon or join the 5 lineages, Solitary Cloud had to fight for it himself. Whether or not he could catch up to Su Zimo would depend on his fortune. Solitary Cloud understood the meaning in Su Zimo's eyes and nodded heavily. At that moment, boundless pride surged in Solitary Cloud's heart. Initially, his goal of cultivation was to transform into a dragon and become one of the dragons. It was only at this moment that he realized that if he could catch up to Su Zimo, his future would be the stars. Even Tianhuang mainland could not trap him. The dragons gradually dispersed. Su Zimo sent Solitary Cloud back to the dragon's lair and left as well. Solitary Cloud needed to cultivate, and so did he. In the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, the Yin and Yang spirit sections were related to the Dragon King of Desolate Ocean. The Yin spirit section was fine and Su Zimo could cultivate it without hindrance. However, the Yang spirit section was filled with a large number of ancient words and he could not understand the profoundness within. That was the reason why he could only comprehend the surface of the barren dermic art in the Yang spirit section and release it forcefully. Its power was neither too great nor too small. The power of Baron did not seem to have any cultivation realm restrictions. Back when he was at the nascent soul realm, he could use Baron to affect the Dharma Daojun. That was the terror of Baron. However, the power of Baron was somewhat useless. Even at the center of Baron, the consumption of lifespan was only 100 years per breath. The consumption at the edges was negligible. Void reversions had a lifespan of 5,000 years. The Dharma Daojun had a lifespan of 10,000 years. For cultivators in their twilight years, Baron was naturally a huge threat. Back then, the Dharma Daojun of Hellfire Hull was enveloped by the barren dermic art. His lifespan was exhausted and he died silently. However, for peak void reversions or Dharma Daojun, the consumption of 100 years of lifespan per breath was not too great. As long as they were strong enough, they could break free and leave. Therefore, Su Zimo intended to make use of the opportunity to cultivate among the dragons to see if he could comprehend the secrets of Baron completely and release its true power. There was only a single dermic art in the Yin spirit and Yang spirit sections. The power of that dermic art was definitely not that useless. Apart from Baron, there was another essence spirit secret skill in the Yang spirit section. Su Zimo had even comprehended a little of the barren dermic art. However, the ancient runes in the essence spirit secret skill were even denser and he could not even understand a little of it. According to the description of the Yang spirit section, the power of that essence spirit secret skill was even more terrifying. That essence spirit secret skill was also the essence of the entire Yang spirit section. The essence spirit secret skill was called reverse scale. Anyone who touched the reverse scale of a dragon would definitely die. If he could comprehend the secrets of the reverse scale among the dragons, his combat strength would rise to another level. Su Zimo headed towards the habitat of the Illumination Dragon lineage with anticipation. He still did not know that the entire habitat of the Illumination Dragon lineage had exploded on his way back. It was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples and caused a huge uproar. Many Illumination Dragons looked down on Su Zimo to begin with. But now, Su Zimo had swept through the mixed dragon lineage and suppressed Long Qiu of the Illumination Dragon lineage, that enraged many Illumination Dragons. Su Zimo had yet to realize that another storm awaited him in the Illumination Dragon lineage. Chapter 1079. Long Qiu was defeated by the new outsider. This Long Mo is quite capable. It said that Long Qiu did not hesitate to violate the rules of the race and transformed into a complete dragon form. However, he was still suppressed by this person in a single move. I don't believe it. How capable can an outsider with an impure bloodline who hasn't even cultivated here be? At that moment, every young Illumination Dragon in the Illumination Dragon's habitat was discussing this matter. Most of the Illumination Dragons at the Void Reversion Realm were eager to try. They had fought and killed each other countless times and were long sick of it. Now that an outsider had arrived, every single Illumination Dragon wanted to fight Su Zimo. I heard that even Long Yi was alarmed and has come out of seclusion. Brother Yi is out of seclusion? An Illumination Dragon exclaimed. Before Brother Yi went into seclusion, he was already 5th on the Hidden Dragon ranking. Now that he's out of seclusion, it seems like he has a chance to advance another rank on the Hidden Dragon ranking. To be able to attract the attention of the dragons of the Hidden Dragon ranking, this Long Mo is not bad. Suddenly, another Illumination Dragon said mysteriously, I heard that it's not just Brother Yi. There's another dragon on the Hidden Dragon ranking who's prepared to cause trouble for Long Mo. Many Illumination Dragons came over and asked curiously, The Illumination Dragon laughed strangely and kept them in suspense before saying in a low voice, the only female dragon on the Hidden Dragon ranking. Pissed. When they heard that, the surrounding Illumination Dragons gasped and their expressions changed. It's that Tyrannosaurus Rex? Given that Tyrannosaurus Rex's temper, even if Long Mo doesn't die, he'll probably be skinned alive. Keep your voice down. If she hears us calling her Tyrannosaurus Rex, she'll definitely come looking for trouble with us. Say, Long, she is so beautiful, but why is her temper even more fiery than our Illumination Dragons? I wonder which dragon can control her? I heard that the number 1 of the Hidden Dragon ranking is pursuing her? You mean, many Illumination Dragons looked at each other with strange expressions. Right then, there was a commotion in the distance as many Illumination Dragons headed over with unfriendly expressions. Long Mo is back. Someone said. On the way, Su Zimo was thinking about his future plans in the dragons. When he arrived at the Torch Dragon's habitat and looked at the Torch Dragons who were full of fighting spirit not far away, he realized that just now was far from enough if he wanted to gain a foothold in the Dragon Bone Valley. In other words, among the dragons, unless there was a thunderous method, one could subdue a group of dragons. Otherwise, there would be no reduction in the number of fights. Many Torch Dragons stood on both sides of the road. Every Torch Dragon looked at Su Zimo with hostility and provocation. Su Zimo calmly walked forward. This is the outsider? There doesn't seem to be anything special about it. He has delicate features and a frail body. I can suppress him with a single finger. More and more Torch Dragons gathered here. After walking for a short distance, Su Zimo realized that he had entered the Primordial Divine Spring the moment he arrived. He did not know the layout of the Torch Dragon's habitat, nor did he know where his dragon lair was. Can you find out where my dragon lair is? Su Zimo came before an Torch Dragon and asked with a smile with a kind expression. Although the Torch Dragon was only at the nascent soul realm, he was not afraid of Su Zimo at all. He merely sneered and rolled his eyes, ignoring the latter completely. Su Zimo was not annoyed either. Taking a few steps forward, he came before another Torch Dragon and asked with a smile, May I know where my dragon lair is? This Torch Dragon was at the Void Reversion Realm. This meant that there was a chance for the two of them to fight. Do you want to know? The Torch Dragon smirked and pointed at his nose, saying coldly, You'll have to get through me first. The two of them were extremely close, less than an arm's length. Su Zimo looked at the young Torch Dragon before him quietly and shook his head gently, sighing. You're too weak. The moment he said that, Su Zimo suddenly reached out. His action was as fast as lightning without any warning. The Torch Dragon had not expected Su Zimo to be so decisive as to make the first move despite being surrounded by dragons. While he was stunned, Su Zimo's palm had already landed on his head and rubbed it gently. A tremendous power surged into his consciousness and the Torch Dragon's eyes rolled back. His body went limp and he fainted on the spot, falling in front of Su Zimo's feet. Long, how dare you? A berating sound came from the dragons. You're not convinced? Su Zimo's gaze swept across. The void reversion torch dragon was fearless and leaped into the air. In midair, he transformed into his half-dragon form with sharp claws and fangs. In a fight between dragons, it was rare for them to transform into their half-dragon form right away. This also meant that the torch dragon was wary and was prepared to release his full strength. Boom! Stomping his feet on the ground, Su Zimo rose from the ground and punched the torch dragon in midair. The torch dragon's eyes shone fiercely as he grabbed Su Zimo's fist with one hand. His other dragon claw grabbed Su Zimo's head. A mocking look flashed through Su Zimo's eyes and he did not dodge at all. Bang! Fist and palm collided. Crack, crack, crack. Immediately after, the sound of bones cracking could be heard in midair. The torch dragon revealed a pained expression as he felt an incomparably terrifying power surge into his body. The first things that could not withstand it were his wrists and arms. Even with the protection of his dragon scales, his bones were broken. Before his other dragon claw could touch Su Zimo's head, his entire body was sent flying by a single punch from Su Zimo. While he was still in midair, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground with tragic cries. With that, the dragons were stunned. There were differences in their combat strength. However, even the strongest expert would find it difficult to unleash such strength to defeat a half-dragon illumination dragon with a single punch. With that strength, he should have a chance to challenge the hidden dragon ranking, right? A weak voice sounded from the crowd. Hidden dragon ranking? Su Zimo frowned slightly. That name seemed familiar, as though he had seen it somewhere before. After pondering for a moment, a thought flashed through his mind. In the central square of the Dragon Bone Valley, he seemed to have seen two gigantic ranking lists on the way to the habitat of the mixed dragon after coming out of the primordial divine spring. One of them was the hidden dragon ranking. On it were the names of 10 dragons and the lineages of the dragons. Even if no one introduced them, he could roughly guess that those who could make it onto the hidden dragon ranking must be the strongest and youngest 10 dragons among the 5 lineages. In reality, Su Zimo's guess was right. The 10 positions of the hidden dragon ranking were the 10 strongest dragons of the void reversion realm among the dragons. The other ranking list was called the heavenly dragon ranking and corresponded to the 10 strongest dragons of the Dharma characteristic realm. Those 2 ranking lists were extremely valuable. The rankings on the ranking lists could change at any time as well. As long as someone could defeat the dragons on them, they would replace them. If nothing went wrong, the young master of the 5 lineages would be the number 1 of the heavenly dragon ranking. Su Zimo had glanced at it before and the deepest impression he had was that there were 5 dragons on the hidden dragon ranking and all of them were from the blue dragon lineage. Furthermore, the number 1 of the hidden dragon and heavenly dragon ranking were both blue dragons. This also confirmed what Long Yen had once said to him. The blue dragon reigned supreme among the 5 lineages. Chapter 1080. To be honest, Su Zimo did not care about these titles at the moment. At the very least, the number 1 of the Jin Dan phenomenon ranking would receive generous rewards. However, there was nothing for the hidden dragon ranking and heavenly dragon ranking. They would only attract continuous challenges from other dragons. Su Zimo only wanted to cultivate quietly among the dragons. After entering the Dharma characteristic realm and receiving the baptism of the ancestral dragon divine pillar, his innate divine powers were awakened. Chaos had already appeared in Tianhuang mainland and many signs indicated that there might be a massive change in the future. The only way to survive the upcoming changes was to raise his strength as soon as possible. However, the tree wanted peace but the wind did not stop. Right now, it was impossible for him to stay out of it. Not far away, a man in scarlet brocade robes walked over slowly with an extraordinary aura. The moment he arrived, the surrounding illumination dragons dispersed instinctively and opened up a path. Although this illumination dragon was also at the void reversion realm, it was clear that he had a high status in the illumination dragon lineage and was extremely dignified. Brother Yi is here. Let's see if Long Mo can still be arrogant this time round. Many illumination dragons looked at Su Zimo with gloating expressions. The brocade-robed man arrived and frowned as he looked at the illumination dragon on the ground who was screaming with a severed arm and an unconscious clansman. The brocade-robed man looked at Su Zimo. Su Zimo looked back calmly with a calm expression. Unlike the other illumination dragons, the brocade-robed man did not reveal great hostility towards Su Zimo. Instead, he cupped his fists slightly and said in a deep voice, "I'm Long Yi." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He had seen Long Ye's name on the hidden dragon ranking before. He seemed to be ranked 5th. Su Zimo nodded and returned the greeting with cupped fists. "I've heard of you. You've just arrived at the dragons and it's normal for you to be ostracized by your clansmen," Long Yi said indifferently. "I have some status among the dragons. How about this? Apologize to these 2 clansmen and we'll forget about today's matter." Many illumination dragons protested when they heard that. "Brother Yi, this kid is too arrogant." "That's right. He's only been here for a month, and he went to the mixed blood dragons to show off. When he came back, he injured 2 of our clansmen. We can't just let this go. Brother Yi, go and extinguish his arrogance, lest he overestimates himself." Long Yi stretched out his hands and pressed down. The voices of the dragons gradually died down. Long Yi said, "Everyone, give me some face. As long as he is willing to sincerely apologize, don't make things difficult for him today." Some of the illumination dragons stopped talking, but they still looked at Su Zimo with hostility, feeling indignant. "Long Imo, help the 2 of them up. Apologize and this matter will be over." Long Yi seemed to be ordering Su Zimo around. Su Zimo suddenly laughed. Long Yi seemed to be helping him and doing him a favor, but in reality, this request was completely unreasonable. There had never been a case where the winner had to apologize to the loser in a battle between the dragon race. At the end of the day, Long Yi did not treat him as a dragon. Or rather, he was only flaunting his might among the dragons, including to an outsider like him. "Why should I apologize?" Su Zimo looked at Long Yi with a fake smile and asked instead. Long Yi turned his head slightly, as though this was the first time he was meeting Su Zimo. With a whoosh, 2 balls of flames burned in his eyes. He really doesn't know what's good for him. Brother Yi, he doesn't want face. Teach him a lesson. There's no need to use a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. Let me do it. Behind Long Yi, an illumination dragon could not hold back and charged out, prepared to fight Su Zimo. Long Yi reached out and stopped the illumination dragon. He glared at Su Zimo and said faintly, "Long Imo, do you know who you're talking to?" Su Zimo smiled gently. "Is there a rule among dragons that the strong have to apologize to the weak?" Long Yi smiled as well. However, everyone could sense that his smile carried a wisp of suppressed rage. "You're merely an outsider. I only gave you this chance because I think highly of you. Since you don't want it, don't blame me." The flames in Long Ye's eyes burned brighter. "Seems like they were right. You truly don't know your place. Today, I'll teach you a lesson. Among dragons, be more mindful. You can't afford to offend anyone." Before he finished his sentence, Long Yi strode forward and raised his arm, smashing down on Su Zimo's head. Swoosh! That arm was like a steel whip and howled over with a sharp wind. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes slightly. As the 5th on the hidden dragon ranking, Long Yi was indeed not weak. The power he released was rather terrifying. Of course, that power could not threaten him. Su Zimo punched in reverse towards Long Ye's fist. Bang! The fists collided. Su Zimo was motionless and his expression was normal. However, Long Yi shuddered. He felt an intense pain surge into his body from his fist. He almost could not hold it in and cried out in pain. It was only at this moment that he realized that Su Zimo was even stronger than he had imagined. But Long Yi channeled his bloodline and the sound of a tsunami echoed from his body. The power of his bloodline flowed through his limbs and bones and the pain from his fist was mostly resolved. Tsunami blood. He had encountered a dragon who had cultivated his bloodline to the tsunami level so quickly. It was definitely not a fluke that Long Yi was able to enter the hidden dragon ranking. "Come on." Long Ye's gaze intensified as he roared, "I'll show you my true strength." Long Yi strode forward once more and charged toward Su Zimo. Rumble. Boom. Su Zimo stood on the spot and channeled his bloodline. The sound of a tsunami echoed from his body as well. It was even deeper and more majestic than Long Ye's bloodline. A commotion broke out among the dragons. Although the pure bloodline of dragons flowed through their bodies and they were strong in combat, most of them had not cultivated to the tsunami blood realm. To think that this outsider with an impure bloodline would have cultivated to the tsunami blood realm. Boom. The two of them collided heavily like two ferocious beasts in human form. Flesh collided against flesh and bones against bones. Blood chi surged and let out a series of chilling sounds. Immediately after, under countless gazes, a figure was sent flying. It was Long Yi, number 5 on the hidden dragon ranking. Long Yi crawled up from the ground swiftly. This bit of injury was negligible to him. However, this loss had already enraged him completely. Roar! Long Yi roared toward Su Zimo and charged forward once more. Bang! 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 The two of them collided repeatedly and clashed head-on. There was no technique and it was a pure fight of strength. Long Yi fell and stood up time and time again. The dragon blood in his body circulated and some superficial injuries did not affect him much. However, the scene before them left the dragons dumbfounded. Nobody expected Su Zimo to be able to fight against Long Yi. Less than that, the dragons did not expect Long Yi to be completely disadvantaged in this battle. Chapter 1081. Long Mo's bloodline is impure, but his melee combat strength is indeed strong. However, melee combat is only a part of one's combat strength. Long Mo is still far from being able to defeat Brother Yi. That's right. As long as Brother Yi uses the secret skill of our Illumination Dragon lineage, victory will be decided immediately. Many Illumination Dragons discussed softly. The secret skill of the Illumination Dragon lineage was the Illumination Dragon Eye. This secret skill was extremely difficult to cultivate and was extremely dangerous. Even in the Illumination Dragon lineage, very few people could cultivate it successfully. If one could cultivate the Illumination Dragon Eye, their combat strength would at least double. In the middle of close combat, the sudden outburst of an eye technique, and such a terrifying eye technique at that, was almost destructive. Even if the other party could defend against it, they would definitely exhaust their blood chi and be flustered. They would not be able to defend against the subsequent attacks. Long Yi charged forward repeatedly but was repelled by Su Zimo repeatedly. The anger in his heart burned even more fiercely. Long Yi reared his head and roared into the skies, releasing a loud dragon roar. A series of crackling sounds came from his body and his body expanded. He had already transformed into his half-dragon form. The wounds on Long Ye's body healed at a visible speed. After transforming into a half-dragon, his speed and strength increased exponentially to an even more terrifying level. Su Zimo was still motionless and had no intention of transforming into a dragon. His scarlet hair danced like burning flames and his eyes shone brightly. Long Yi charged forward once more and threw out a punch. Su Zimo was fearless and did not dodge at all. Striding forward, he threw a punch forward. Boom! The fists collided with a deafening bang. A huge air current spread in all directions and heat waves surged. Even after transforming into a half-dragon, Long Yi could not gain the upper hand. Instantly, Long Yi realized that he was definitely not a match for Long Mo in melee combat. However, there was no hint of panic in his eyes. Instead, a bedazzling light lit up in his right eye like a blazing sun. Suddenly, a beam of light shot toward Su Zimo's head. Illumination Dragon Eye. A series of exclamations sounded from the dragons. Many of the Illumination Dragons looked excited. This secret technique was the pride of the Candle Dragons. The release of the Illumination Dragon Eye meant that the outcome was decided. Long Yi was able to sit at the 5th place of the Hidden Dragon role, not by relying on his close combat strength, but by relying on his Dao ocular technique. However, right after, when the dragons saw the other side, their expressions froze on their faces. Instantly, they were speechless and widened their eyes in disbelief. At the same time that Long Yi released the torch dragon eye, Su Zimo's right eye also released a blazing beam of light. Furthermore, this beam of light had an additional layer of sharpness compared to Long Ye's beam of light, as if it could cut and tear apart everything. Torch dragon's eye? The dragons were dumbfounded. Long Emo was only an outsider who did not have the time or opportunity to cultivate among the dragons. How could he know about the torch dragon eye? Every torch dragon knew how difficult it was to cultivate this mystic technique. However, this outsider with an impure bloodline had succeeded in cultivating it. What was even more terrifying was that this outsider's illumination dragon eye seemed to be even stronger than Long Ye's. How was this possible? Boom! The sound produced by the clash of ocular techniques was even more terrifying. Two pillars of light shattered. Long Yi shrieked tragically. Blood seeped out of his right eye. Although he was not blind, it still looked terrifying. Among the dragons, no one knew that Su Zimo's illumination dragon eye was not only the secret skill of the torch dragons, but also a illumination stone. The illumination stone transformed into a set of flying swords and released the illumination sword formation. Long Ye's illumination dragon eye was no match for the combination of the two powers. Of course, the power of Long Ye's ocular technique was already rather terrifying. If this was in the cultivation world, even the Dharma Daojuan's eyes would be pierced by that attack. Long Emo, how dare you hurt me? Long Yi lunged forward once more with a menacing expression. His glabella shone and an incomparably powerful spirit consciousness attack burst forth. Essence spirit secret skills were not allowed in the habitat of the dragons. That was because once an essence spirit secret skill was released, it was difficult to stop it and it was easy for one to die in an irreversible situation. However, dragons could release spirit consciousness attacks in a fight. That was Long Ye's final trump card. He did not believe that the strength of his spirit consciousness could not compare to an outsider who had just entered the void reversion realm after cultivating for so many years and reaching the perfected void reversion realm. However, he did not realize what sort of opponent he was facing. Although Su Zimo had just entered the void reversion realm, he cultivated the cultivation technique left behind by Dayu. Even if he had just entered the void reversion realm and condensed a yang spirit, he was not someone Long Yi could deal with. Scram! Su Zimo revealed a hint of impatience when he saw Long Yi lunge forward once more. He condensed his spirit consciousness and counterattacked. If Long Ye's spirit consciousness was like a surging river, the spirit consciousness that burst forth from Su Zimo was like a raging tsunami. Boom! The two spirit consciousnesses collided. Long Ye's expression changed in shock as he grunted. Blood drained from his face and he felt a sharp pain in his mind, almost fainting. In that moment of distraction, Su Zimo had already closed in and punched him in the chest. Bang! A terrifying power surged into his body. Long Yi could clearly feel that his chest had been shattered, and his heart had stopped beating for a moment. He felt the world spin and he was sent flying far away. Finally, he slammed heavily onto the ground with pain all over his body. He had lost. He was dragged down from the hidden dragon ranking by an outsider just like that. Long Yi lay in the mud and looked at the gray skies with a dim gaze. Up till this point of his cultivation, he had fought countless times with his clansmen and lost countless times as well. However, this time round, the blow to him was way too great. Brother Yi, are you all right? Many torch dragons ran over with worried expressions. When these voices landed in his ears, they seemed to be extremely far away. Heis. Long Yi sighed gently and closed his eyes. His emotions were complicated and he could not tell if he was happy or worried. It was sad to be defeated. However, he knew one thing. From this day forth, the illumination dragon lineage was going to rise. The two torch dragons carried Long Yi and quickly ran to the back, preparing to find someone to treat Long Ye's injuries. However, the surrounding dragons did not disperse for a long time. Many illumination dragons looked at Su Zimo with reverence. At that moment, none of the illumination dragons jumped out and accused Su Zimo of being an outsider. There were no more illumination dragons berating him for being a bastard with an impure bloodline. As Long Yen had said, strength reigned supreme among dragons. If he wanted to gain a foothold here and obtain the respect and recognition of the dragons, he could only rely on his own fists. In the central square, a change happened on the gigantic hidden dragon ranking. The fifth row of the hidden dragon ranking, Long Yi Illumination Dragon, suddenly moved down a row. Many dragons would gather in the central square every day. The change in the hidden dragon ranking attracted the gazes of many dragons. The fifth row of the hidden dragon ranking has changed hands? Who defeated Long Yi? Could it be Long Shi? I heard that she just went to Illumination Dragon. Just as the dragons were discussing, 4 words appeared on the fifth row of the hidden dragon ranking that had disappeared. Long Imo, Illumination Dragon. Chapter 1082. Long Imo? When did such an incredible person appear in the Illumination Dragon lineage? Why haven't I heard of him before? Someone looked confused. Strange, why do I find this Long Imo familiar? The dragons pointed at the hidden dragon ranking and discussed fervently. Suddenly, an exclamation sounded from the dragons. I've got it! A dragon said, this Long Imo is the outsider who joined the Illumination Dragon lineage a month ago. It's him. He seems to have caused a huge ruckus at the mixed dragon's side. To think that he would have such combat strength to defeat Long Yi. I heard that the elders of the Illumination Dragon lineage are interested in matchmaking him and Long Shi. Long Shi has already charged over. Her nickname is the Tyrant Dragon. How can she tolerate something as such? Long Imo should be prepared to suffer. Someone gloated. That's not right. Right then, a dragon pointed at the ranking on the hidden dragon ranking and said, Long Shi is ranked 8th on the hidden dragon ranking. She seems to be below Long Imo. It was only at this moment that the dragons realized that there was a change in the hidden dragon ranking. Long Mo's combat strength was even stronger than Long Shi's. Now, the consequences of Long Shi charging over, the dragons exchanged glances and ran towards the Illumination Dragon's habitat tacitly. After defeating Long Yi, Su Zimo looked at the respectful gazes of the dragons and finally relaxed. This was good as well. He did not have to fight them one by one. Suppressing the 5th on the hidden dragon ranking could be considered as solving the problem once and for all and saving him a lot of trouble. He was about to find a random dragon and ask where his lair was when there was a commotion behind him. Where's Long Imo? A deafening voice sounded, causing Su Zimo's eardrums to ache. Normally speaking, the Illumination Dragon was of the fire attribute and the temperature of its habitat was extremely high. However, at that moment, the surrounding temperature plummeted. When the surrounding dragons saw who it was, their expressions changed and they retreated instinctively. Su Zimo frowned and turned around. Not far away, a few members of the dragon tribe rushed over in a menacing manner. Their leader was a young lady. She wore a tight white robe that perfectly outlined her tall and curvaceous figure. This woman's face was fair, and her facial features were well defined. When put together, it was filled with a different kind of beauty. The twin peaks in front of her chest were very majestic and magnificent, as if they were about to burst out at any moment. Who is Long Imo? Step forward. As she approached, the woman suddenly opened her mouth and roared. This woman was definitely a beauty. However, his voice was truly frightening. At the very least, Su Zimo was shocked when he was caught off guard. At this moment, the dragons were scattered all around, and Su Zimo was standing in the middle of the field, appearing extremely out of place. The woman turned her gaze and immediately saw Su Zimo. She took 3 large steps forward and arrived in front of him. The woman was half a head taller than Su Zimo. Tell me where Long Imo is. Under close observation, the woman's eyes were deep and profound. Her eyes were like 2 sapphires, shining brightly. Su Zimo felt his head ache. This dragon before him clearly did not belong to the Illumination Dragon lineage. Based on the discussions around him, it seemed like this woman was from the Hornless Dragon lineage. He had just arrived at the Dragon Bone Valley and came out of the primordial divine spring. He truly did not know how he was related to this woman from the Empress Dragons. Su Zimo could tell that this woman did not have good intentions. However, he still smiled gently. I'm Long Mo, you are? The woman was stunned. A hint of shock flashed through her gem-like eyes and she looked a little adorable. It was completely different from her fierce appearance just now. However, the woman reacted quickly. Clenching her fists, she twisted her neck and grit her teeth. All right, how dare you? Su Zimo was confused. He did not know why he was so bold. Could it be that just now Long Yi was the Dao companion of this beauty from the Empress Dragons? Because he had beaten Long Yi up, his wife had come knocking on his door? You're Long Ye's Dao companion? Su Zimo tried asking. A suppressed laughter sounded from the dragons. Long Imo is in trouble now. To think that he would dare to tease a tyrant dragon like this. How ferocious. Many dragons had gloating expressions on their faces. Keep pretending. Keep pretending. The woman from the Empress Dragons gritted her white teeth and her eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of ice as she said coldly, How dare you propose marriage to me, you outsider with an impure bloodline? You must have a death wish. Marriage proposal? Su Zimo was stunned. He had just come out of the primordial divine spring. What marriage was he talking about? Suddenly, the woman from the Empress Dragons opened her mouth and spat out a white aura at Su Zimo. The surrounding temperature plummeted and a layer of frost even formed on the ground. Dragon breath. It was an ability that every dragon was born with. Of course, the power of different dragons' dragon breaths was different as well. The dragon breath of this woman from the Empress Dragons was frost. While Su Zimo was in a daze, the woman from the Empress Dragons opened her mouth and exhaled at him. The fragrance assaulted him. Immediately after, his head, scarlet hair, face, body and limbs were shrouded in a layer of frost. Thereafter, it froze into ice at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had already vanished and a human-shaped ice sculpture appeared on the spot. He's in trouble now. His organs will be severely injured after being frozen by the tyrant dragon's dragon breath. I reckon he won't be able to recover without half a month. The dragons discussed among themselves, but none of them showed any sympathy. The woman from the Empress Dragons knocked the ice sculpture in front of her gently and sneered, I'll let you continue pretending. This is just a little pain for you. Crack, crack. Right at this moment, a series of cracking sounds suddenly rang out in the void. The woman from the Empress Dragons was stunned. Immediately after, right in front of countless gazes, a crack appeared on the human-shaped ice sculpture and expanded rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it filled the entire ice sculpture. Boom! There was a deafening sound. A figure walked out with surging blood chi and scarlet hair that resembled flames. He exuded a torrential aura and glared at the woman from the Empress Dragons with a burning gaze. Pissed, the dragons sucked in a breath of cold air. He was fine even after being struck by the Empress Dragon's dragon breath. The woman from the Empress Dragons reacted quickly and her blood chi surged with a cold aura. Suddenly, she charged toward Su Zimo. Bang! Although the woman from the Empress Dragons charged quickly, she retreated even faster. The moment she charged forward, she was punched back by Su Zimo. The woman from the Empress Dragons rolled a few times on the ground and stood up before long. Panting slightly, she grit her teeth and said, How dare you hit me? Before she could finish her sentence, her vision blurred and a scarlet shadow flashed. She was sent flying once more and slammed heavily onto the ground with a bang. Roar! The woman from the Empress Dragons was enraged and roared. A series of crackling sounds could be heard from her body as her body expanded. The woman's clothes burst open and silver-white dragon scales appeared on her body. They were like sparkling snowflakes that lined up tightly together. Chapter 1083. As the proud daughter of dragons, Long she had a fiery personality. Coupled with her strong combat strength, she was fearless in the Dragon Bone Valley and almost no one dared to provoke her. She was about to break through to the Dharma characteristic realm. To think that she would be suppressed by an outsider. Furthermore, this outsider dared to tease her openly. She did not care about the marriage agreement. Her husband had to become an unprecedented five-clawed divine dragon like the heavenly dragon ranking number 1, Long Tsong. Who did this outsider think he was? Dragonification. Without hesitation, Long Shi transformed into her half-dragon form and prepared to tear the outsider not far away into shreds. Su Zimo did not give Long Shi much time to react at all. He strode forward and reached out, slapping her back heavily. Under normal circumstances, that palm should have landed on Long Shi's back. However, in her half-dragon form, her body expanded and elongated. Su Zimo's palm was no longer on Long Shi's back, but her round and voluptuous buttocks. This change happened in an instant. By the time Su Zimo realized it, it was already too late and he hurriedly retracted his strength. Indeed, Su Zimo had retracted most of his strength. However, his palm could not help but land on Long Shi's buttocks with a crisp sound that was neither light nor heavy. Her flesh trembled. Instantly, the entire battlefield fell silent. Many dragons were dumbfounded. Heavens, what did Long Imo do? He's actually slapping the tyrant dragon's buttocks. Is that a slap? He's clearly touching. The dragons roared furiously in their hearts. Long Shi had just transformed into a half-dragon when she suffered such a blow. Her entire body immediately became extremely stiff, and with a whoosh, a blush appeared on her fair face. Su Zimo sighed internally with a helpless expression. He could even hear Long Shi gritting her teeth. This was a huge misunderstanding. There was no possibility of an explanation. Could he say that he accidentally slapped her buttocks? That explanation would only cause the female dragon to go berserk. I'm going to kill you. A few words popped out from between Long Shi's teeth. Her tone was cold and the surrounding temperature had already dropped to a freezing point. She had never suffered such humiliation before. Long Shi's vital energy and blood surged as she struggled to stand up and fight Su Zimo to the death. Su Zimo was thinking about how to deal with the situation in front of him when he felt Long Shi's movements. His hand, which had not been retracted in time, instinctively pressed down. But Long Shi had just gotten up when that despicable palm landed on her but again. Plop. This time, she was directly pressed to the ground, unable to move at all. The dragons were in an uproar. Long Imo actually touched it again. You? Long Shi looked embarrassed and angry. Su Zimo cursed in his heart. His palm moved and landed on the back of Long Shi's head. With a light pat, he knocked her unconscious. No matter what, he had to knock this female dragon out first. The blood in Long Shi's body gradually calmed down. The silver-white scales on her body were also gradually disappearing. Long Shi's clothes were already torn and her dragon scales faded, revealing her fair skin that shone with a charming luster. A slender and perfect body was about to be exposed to the dragons. Gulp, gulp. The sound of gulping could be heard from the dragons. Countless dragons widened their eyes, ready to feast their eyes on the scene. All of a sudden, a piece of clothing covered her perfect body. A sigh sounded from the dragons at the same time, looking rather spectacular. Su Zimo had taken out his shirt in time to cover Long Shi, who was almost exposed. The dragons glared. Although the dragons were angry, they could not say anything. Su Zimo stood up and looked at the few hornless dragons not far away. He cupped his fists. I'm sorry. Just now, I was a little rude. There should be some misunderstanding here. Miss, please help me take care of her. The few hornless dragons were slightly stunned. They were all dragons and had never heard such a refined tone. One of the hornless dragons was the first to react when he heard Su Zimo's interesting words. He pursed his lips and smiled. Actually, logically speaking, you're not considered rude. That's right, that's right. Another hornless dragon smiled. Given your relationship, it's fine to touch her casually. However, don't do it in front of so many people next time. Hee hee. The other hornless dragons giggled as well. Nobody noticed that Long Shi, who was sprawled on the ground motionlessly, blushed even more shyly. Su Zimo rubbed his forehead gently. There was no way he could explain this matter clearly. Let's go. The few hornless dragons helped Long Shi up and waved to Su Zimo with a much better attitude than before. Su Zimo was still confused, not understanding how he was related to this woman from the hornless dragon race. After pondering for a while, he could not figure it out. He was prepared to throw this matter to the back of his mind and cultivate first. As soon as he turned around, a dragon immediately came up to him and gave him a thumbs up. "Brother Mo, my name is Long Can. You can call me Can." The illumination dragon named Long Can was very enthusiastic. "Brother Mo, I know where your dragon lair is. I'll bring you there." "All right." Su Zimo was momentarily stunned before nodding. Prior to this, none of the dragons bothered with him when he asked continuously. But now, before he could ask, a dragon had already stepped forward. It was true that strength reigned supreme among dragons. Su Zimo thought that it was because he defeated Long Yi, who was 5th on the hidden dragon ranking, that he obtained the recognition of the dragons. However, in reality, the true reason why he obtained the recognition of the dragons was because he touched Long Shi's buttocks. And it was twice. In the eyes of the dragons, this was much more impressive than the hidden dragon ranking. Su Zimo followed Long Can forward, and many dragons looked at him with admiration. Some dragons even took the initiative to greet him and gave him a thumbs up. "Just now, who is that hornless dragon? What has it got to do with me?" After a moment, Su Zimo could not help but ask, "Brother Imo, you really don't know?" Long Can asked. When he saw Su Zimo shake his head, Long Can explained, "Sister, she was originally engaged to Brother Yen before she was born. However, after she grew up, Sister Shi's temper was too explosive and the two of them did not like each other. At that time, they caused a huge fuss and parted on bad terms. Hence, the matter was left unsettled. Naturally, Long Yen was the child of the red-headed ghost." Long Can continued, "Brother Imo, the reason why you came to our candle dragons was to replace Brother Yen." The elders went to the candle dragons to propose marriage again. Given Sister Shi's pride, she naturally wouldn't agree and charged over to teach you a lesson. To think that he... At that point, Long Shi winked at Su Zimo and smiled. "Brother Mo, if you can subdue Sister Shi, our candle dragons will definitely acknowledge you as their young master. Don't be fooled by Sister Shi's temper. She's a nice person." Long Can even put in a good word for Long Shi. At that point, Su Zimo had already reacted. Clenching his fists slightly, he gritted his teeth. Those old fogies. Initially, this trouble had nothing to do with him. It was the elders of the candle dragons who went to propose marriage that provoked the tyrant dragon. Chapter 1084. This matter was probably not over yet. Su Zimo did not intend to think about it anymore. As long as he returned to his dragon lair, Long Shi would not be able to barge in even if she came knocking. Su Zimo said in a low voice, "By the way, where are the cultivation techniques of our illumination dragon lineage? I intend to take a look." "Follow me." Long Can led Su Zimo forward and arrived in front of a hall. After passing through the inspection of the two guards at the entrance of the hall, the two of them entered. The hall was not big and there were not many cultivation technique secret manuals inside. There were not even as many as Misty Peak cultivation techniques. For a race like dragons, even if they did not cultivate any cultivation techniques, their strength would continue to rise as they aged. Cultivation techniques were only supplementary for dragons. Su Zimo was not interested in the cultivation techniques of dragons either. Even the top cultivation techniques of dragons could not compare to the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. His only motive for coming here was to decipher the mysteries of the Baron Dermic art and essence spirit secret skill in the Yang spirit section. After flipping through a few ancient books casually, Su Zimo's eyes lit up. Indeed, it was as he had guessed. The ancient and strange symbols in the Baron Dermic art and essence spirit secret skill were actually the words of dragons. Su Zimo did not understand the words of dragons and naturally could not understand the mysteries within. After confirming that, he copied some of the most basic ancient books in the hall and tried his best to learn the words of dragons as soon as possible so that he could cultivate Baron and the essence spirit's secret skill. Su Zimo left the hall and bade farewell to Long Can. He returned to his dragon lair and entered seclusion cultivation. At the same time, News of the two battles in the Illumination Dragon's lair spread through the entire Dragon Bone Valley at the fastest speed. Normally speaking, Long Ye's defeat would be the focus of attention since he was ranked 5th on the Hidden Dragon ranking. However, in the following period of time, the dragons were mostly discussing the battle between Su Zimo and Long Shi. Almost no one cared if Long Yi was ranked 5th or 6th on the Hidden Dragon ranking. Blue Dragon's lair. What? An azure dragon frowned slightly. His eyes were filled with anger as he said coldly, "Someone dares to bully Long Shi? Brother Long Yang, I heard that the newcomer, Long Mo, not only bullied Sister Shi, but he also spanked her." Another blue dragon said softly. The blue dragon called Long Yang had a slender figure and a head of long green hair. His face was soft and his facial features were exquisite. Although he was a man, he was even more beautiful than a woman. If Long Yang were to dress as a woman, he would probably be inferior to Long Shi. "You really don't know what death is." Long Yang stood up slowly and walked out. A gentle look flashed through his eyes as he whispered, "I have to go and comfort Sister Long Shi. She's impatient and is probably going to explode from anger." Before long, Long Yang arrived at the hornless dragon lineage. As soon as he arrived outside Long Shi's residence, he heard low growls coming from inside. Very quickly, a few hornless dragons walked out with disheveled expressions and were scolded badly by the angry Long Shi. "Sister Long Shi, it's me." Long Yang stood outside the cave and said gently, "I heard that someone bullied you, so I came to see you." A series of heavy footsteps sounded. Before long, Long Shi's figure appeared outside the cave. A dazzling smile appeared on Long Yang's face. Long Shi glared fiercely at Long Yang with bloodshot eyes. She gritted her teeth and said, "Get lost, you sissy." The smile on Long Yang's face froze. There were many hornless dragons patrolling the vicinity. When they heard that, the hornless dragons grimaced and were secretly shocked. Long Yang was a man, but he was even more beautiful than a woman. Coupled with his gentle voice, there were many people who bullied him and called him a sissy since he was young. However, later on, no one dared to say those words in front of Long Yang anymore. As Long Yang grew up, he endured many humiliation and cultivated continuously while fighting against others. Although he became more beautiful, his strength also increased. Right now, he was already the number 1 of the Hidden Dragon ranking. In the Dragon Bone Valley, apart from Long Shi, almost all the Void Reversion Dragons were taught a lesson by him, be it men or women. That was Long Shi. If it was any other dragon, they would be skinned if they dared to say those words even if they did not die. Long Yang was silent for a moment before he suddenly smiled. "Sister Long Shi, I know that you're angry. However, don't worry, I'll teach that Long Mo a lesson for you." "I don't need you." Long Shi harumphed coldly. "This is my own matter. I'll handle it myself." "Long Yang, you're even prettier than me. Why are you always pestering me? Don't bother me anymore." Long Shi cursed angrily and turned to walk into the cave. Long Yang was not annoyed. He lowered his head slightly and smiled gently, murmuring softly, "Sister Long Shi, don't be angry. I'll bring Long Mo's head to see you and let you vent your anger." Although Long Yang was smiling, a sinister killing intent flashed through his eyes. "Impure bloodline, outsider. Even if I kill him, it's nothing much." Long Yang sneered and shook his head before turning to leave. Su Zimo, who was cultivating in his dragon lair, naturally did not know that he had made a mortal enemy for no reason after arriving at the dragon's world for just over a month. Furthermore, he had yet to meet this person. Or rather, even if he knew, he would not care. At that moment, Su Zimo was already completely immersed in the Yang spirit section. When he truly learned the words of the dragon's world and studied the Baron Dermic art and the essence spirit's secret skill again, he finally understood the profoundness of that Dermic art and secret skill. It was only then that he truly felt the terror of the Yang spirit section. Initially, when Su Zimo released the Baron Dermic art, it covered a huge area like a swamp with him as the center. All living beings in the swamp, be it friend or foe, would be corroded by the Baron Dermic art. But now, a gray mist appeared in Su Zimo's palm. It rolled and changed, emitting a strange aura. The mist seemed to contain the mysteries of heaven and earth and the truths of the great Tao. This was barren, something that could change according to one's will. Previously, even at the center of barren, the reduction in lifespan was only 100 years per breath. If one was at the edge of barren, the reduction in lifespan would be even slower and almost negligible. But now, any living being that came into contact with the mist in Su Zimo's palm would have their lifespan reduced by 500 years per breath. After comprehending the profoundness of barren, its power was 5 times greater than before. This was a qualitative leap. A void reversion had a lifespan of 5,000 years. 500 years per breath meant that even void reversions with 5,000 years of lifespan could not last more than 10 breaths under the envelopment of barren. Su Zimo waved his palm and the mist dissipated. After comprehending the words of the dragons, the power of barren increased greatly, but that was secondary. The true gain was the essence of the Yang Spirit section, the Essence Spirit's secret skill. Chapter 1085. Half a year later. Dragon Bone Valley, Illumination Dragon's habitat. In a dark and warm cave, 2 beams of light suddenly lit up like 2 balls of flames. Under the illumination of the 2 balls of flames, the outline of a figure gradually became clearer. It was Su Zimo, who had been in seclusion for half a year. He heaved a long sigh of relief, and the flames in his eyes retracted gradually, turning into nothingness. The entire cave abode returned to darkness. He had gained a lot in the past half a year. It was not only his comprehension of the barren dermic art and Essence Spirit's secret skill, even his illumination dragon eye had mutated. Initially, there was an illumination stone in his right eye. However, after half a year of cultivation, the illumination stone had already disappeared. To be precise, it had fused into his right eye. Be it the illumination sword formation or the illumination dragon eye, they were both secret skills comprehended through the illumination stone. But now, those 2 secret skills had merged into one in Su Zimo's body. That visual technique could no longer be considered as the illumination dragon eye. The power released by the visual technique was not only the scorching heat of the illumination dragon eye, but also the sharpness of the illumination sword formation. That visual technique had become the true illumination eye. Su Zimo stood up slowly. He could sense the changes in his body for the past half a year. Without the restriction of the black-haired essence spirit, he was no different from dragons. He cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness day and night, and the strength in his body rose daily. That was the strength of dragons. As long as he continued to grow, the strength in his body would continue to rise. Coupled with the augmentation of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, Su Zimo's cultivation speed was even faster, and he almost had no bottlenecks at the void reversion realm. Su Zimo wanted to cultivate to the peak of the void reversion realm as soon as possible. At the peak of the void reversion realm, he could undergo the baptism of the ancestral dragon divine pillar and enter the Dharma characteristic realm in one go to comprehend the innate divine powers of dragons. He would only truly have the strength to protect himself after entering the Dharma characteristic realm and relying on his true body of dragons. Of course, Su Zimo had another layer of anticipation in his heart. In his memories, the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness ended at the Yang section, and there were no more words left. But he had a feeling that this matter was not so simple. The mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the 12 demon kings of the 12 demon kings of the 12 demon kings. But now, there were only 8 demon kings in his bloodline phenomenon, including the divine dragon. If that was the case, there should still be 4 demon kings that had yet to appear. He wanted to enter the Dharma characteristic realm as soon as possible and see if there was anything left behind from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Su Zimo stood up. After half a year of seclusion, he planned to see how Solitary Cloud was doing. As soon as he left his cave, he saw many dragons loitering outside. Apart from the torch dragon, there were also some azure dragons, hornless dragons, and winged dragons. He's out, quickly informed Brother Yang. You stay here and watch, I'll go now. When some of the dragons saw Su Zimo leave the cave, they exclaimed in a low voice. Some of them turned around and left, quickly disappearing from sight. Su Zimo did not mind and walked towards the habitat of the mixed blood dragons. Before long, he saw Solitary Cloud. Solitary Cloud had changed even more after half a year. Actually, after Solitary Cloud's heart was shattered by Di'in, he reconstructed a new heart in the primordial divine spring. In fact, that heart was no different from a dragon's heart. Half a year ago, he was bullied by many mixed blood dragons and did not have the time to cultivate. As such, the dragon heart did not display its might. But now, after half a year of cultivation, his aura had changed drastically and was infinitely close to that of a dragon. At the very least, Solitary Cloud no longer felt any pressure in front of a rain dragon and other mixed blood dragons. Dragon blood had already begun to flow through his body. He was only short of an opportunity to transform into a dragon. Su Zimo was rather happy to see such a change in Solitary Cloud. The two of them chatted for a while before Su Zimo stood up and bade farewell. Before long, a group of dragons walked over. The leader of the dragons had a head of black hair and was extremely beautiful. She was even prettier than Long Shi, whom Su Zimo had seen before. However, the dragons had a feminine gaze as they glared at Su Zimo coldly with an unfriendly expression. Trouble is here. Su Zimo sighed internally. He did not know what relationship this female dragon had with Long Shi and if she was her elder sister or younger sister. You're Long Imo? The leader of the blue dragons blocked Su Zimo's path and asked coldly. Su Zimo nodded. Compared to Long Shi, this female dragon looked much more normal and her voice was pleasant, unlike Long Shi's loud voice. I'm Long Yang, the azure dragon in green robes said indifferently and paused, as though he was waiting for Su Zimo to reveal a look of fear and respect. Long Yang, number 1 of the hidden dragon ranking. Among the dragons, no one would be indifferent when they heard that name. Half a year ago, Su Zimo had inadvertently glanced at the hidden dragon ranking. However, for the past half a year, he had been focused on studying the words of dragons and had long forgotten about the hidden dragon ranking. When he heard the name Long Yang, he was only stunned for a moment and was a little lost. Pondering for a moment, Su Zimo cupped his fists. Greetings, Miss Long Yang. The moment he said that, the entire place fell silent. The surrounding dragons grinned and gasped, looking at Su Zimo as though they were looking at a dead man. Although Long Yang was beautiful, he was a man. Among the dragons, everyone knew that this was his taboo. In the past, there was a dragon who mocked him to his face and was forced into the dragon blood battlefield by him. At the risk of being severely injured, he killed that dragon. Ever since then, no one among the dragons dared to touch his taboo. But now, Su Zimo's unintentional words were equivalent to touching Long Yang's reverse scale. Long Yang's expression turned cold instantly. When Su Zimo saw the reactions of the surrounding dragons, he realized that he might have said something wrong. However, he truly could not figure out the reason. After all, the person before him was a woman and Su Zimo did not want to be entangled with her. He cupped his fists once more and said sincerely, Miss Long Yang, it's my first time here and I might have offended you in any way. Please forgive me. Although he was sincere, his words were extremely ear-piercing to Long Yang. Cut the crap and enter the dragon blood battlefield. Long Yang grit his teeth. Today I'll take your life. Su Zimo frowned. Even now, he was still confused. This was his first time meeting Long Yang. How did they end up in the dragon blood battlefield? According to Uncle Yen, entering the dragon blood battlefield meant that one could fight to the death. Even if one died, no one would interfere. Long Yang glared at Su Zimo coldly and turned to leave, heading straight for the dragon blood battlefield. Unless one stayed in their own dragon's lair, they had no right to reject a challenge and had to accept it. Su Zimo pondered for a moment and could not figure it out. However, he still followed with an indifferent expression. It was just a life and death battle. He had experienced too much. The dragons looked excited as they headed towards the dragon blood battlefield in a black mass. Passing by the central square, Su Zimo looked up and finally saw Long Yang's name on the first row of the hidden dragon ranking. Number 1 of the hidden dragon ranking, Su Zimo smiled gently and murmured, "That's good as well. Once and for all, there shouldn't be any trouble after this battle." Chapter 1086. Sister Shi, Sister Shi. Among the dragons, a hornless dragon ran in front of Long Shi and panted slightly. Long Yang is looking for Long Emo. The two of them are going to fight to the death in the dragon blood battlefield. Long Shi's expression changed slightly as she frowned and fell into deep thought. Sister Shi, this is a good thing, right? After all, Long Emo bullied you before, the hornless dragon said tentatively. What do you know? Long Shi stomped her feet and turned to run over. The news of Long Yang and Long Emo entering the dragon blood battlefield spread rapidly through the entire Dragon Bone Valley. Almost all the dragons who were not in seclusion ran over to watch the battle. Who do you think will win this battle? Of course. Long Yang is the number 1 of the hidden dragon ranking and Long Emo is the 5th. Furthermore, I heard that he has just entered the void reversion realm. That's right. Instead of saying who wins or loses, let's talk about how long Long Emo can last. I heard that Long Emo had a death wish and violated Long Yang's taboo. Before Long Yang and Long Emo arrived, many dragons had already gathered around the battlefield and it was bustling. Before long, the dragons dispersed. Long Yang walked over slowly with a dark expression and ascended the blood-stained dragon blood battlefield. Su Zimo followed behind with an indifferent expression. The battlefield was vast and filled with the strong stench of blood. The two of them stood opposite each other. Long Yang, get down here. I don't need you to stand up for me. Suddenly, a loud roar sounded from below the battlefield. It was Long Shi who appeared and shouted at Long Yang. Long Yang glanced sideways and shook his head. Sister Long Shi, this has nothing to do with you. Long Emo has a death wish. Long Shi was speechless. Under normal circumstances, she should be happy that Long Yang helped her teach Long Emo a lesson. Even if Long Emo was killed, it had nothing to do with her. However, for some reason, deep in her heart, she did not want the two of them to fight to the death. More and more dragons gathered here. Long Yang said faintly, "If you have any last words, you can tell me. I will complete them for you." Su Zimo couldn't help but laugh. He shook his head and said, "I don't have any last words. Just don't disappoint me. I haven't exercised my muscles and bones since I came here." How arrogant! To the dragons, that sentence sounded extremely arrogant. A series of boos sounded from the dragons. Many dragons sneered. However, Long Yang did not smile. He suddenly realized that Long Emo was too calm. Long Yang put away his contempt and narrowed his eyes. Suddenly, he exerted strength in his feet and turned into a green beam of light. Instantly, he arrived in front of Su Zimo. Clang, clang, clang. Long Yang reached out his palm and bent his fingers slightly. Sharp nails popped out from his fingertips, shining with a cold light. A strong suction force was emitted from the palm, which completely encapsulated Su Zimo's figure. Su Zimo looked surprised. Long Yang's move was an extremely brilliant melee combat technique. When the Dragon Clan fought, most of them relied on their physical bodies to fight in close combat. But now, not only did Long Yang reveal his powerful physique and terrifying burst forth, he even revealed this brilliant melee combat technique and instantly gained the upper hand. Su Zimo was in no hurry. Rubbing his palm like a saber, he slashed towards the void not far ahead. Ha! What's that? Long Emo is already flustered. When the dragons below caught sight of Su Zimo's move, they burst into laughter. However, right after, the laughter of the dragons stopped abruptly. As Su Zimo's palm slashed down, a gigantic ocean vortex appeared on the battlefield. A series of terrifying roars sounded, as though it could engulf all living beings and drown them completely. Vortex dance. He used his palm as a saber and released the saber intent of the sea calming manual. Long Yang's expression changed slightly. The suction force that burst forth from his palm dissipated instantly against the terrifying vortex. His body swayed and he could not stand steadily. But Long Yang roared and released his blood chi, causing the sound of a tsunami to echo from his body. Tsunami blood. A tsunami seemed to have condensed within Long Yang's body as well, fighting against the surrounding vortex. Instantly, his body stabilized. Swoosh. Long Yang's palm continued to grab Su Zimo's face. Su Zimo lamented internally. Ever since he started his cultivation, there were only 2 cultivators in the entire cultivation world who were able to cultivate the blood tide technique. Who would have thought that in less than a year after coming to the Dragon Clan, the 2 Dragon Clan members he encountered would have reached this level? Without thinking, Su Zimo released his blood chi right away as well. Rumble. Boom. The sound of a tsunami echoed. Su Zimo strode forward and punched Long Yang's palm viciously. Bang. 2 tremendous forces suddenly collided and blood chi corroded. It was as though 2 gigantic tsunamis had collided with a loud bang. Long Yang's expression changed slightly as he retreated. Su Zimo took a step back as well. After coming to Dragon Bone Valley, this was the first dragon that could force him to take a step back. All right. Su Zimo laughed and strode forward once more, charging towards Long Yang. Long Yang frowned. This collision caused his aura to stagnate and he could not advance again. However, Long Emo did not seem to be affected at all. In reality, when Su Zimo cultivated the title manual, his blood chi surged endlessly like a tsunami, wave after wave without stopping. With the help of tidal might, his strength was still rising continuously. Su Zimo threw out another punch with unparalleled ferocity. Long Yang did not dodge or dodge. His blood chi burst forth and he punched in reverse. Boom. The fists collided. Su Zimo took another step back. As for Long Yang, he took 3 steps back. Before he could catch his breath, a figure flashed in front of him. Su Zimo had charged forward once more and punched down. Boom. Following that, Long Yang retreated once more. Boom. 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 Su Zimo advanced continuously and punched down one after another. His strength rose continuously and he was like a peerless god of war with a torrential aura. His attacks were as dense as rain, but they were extremely ferocious and did not give Long Yang any chance to catch his breath. Long Yang could only retreat repeatedly against the head-on collision. His expression became somewhat unsightly. Against such an attack, he did not even have the strength to retaliate. It was impossible for him to even retreat, let alone retaliate. Right now, he was completely trapped in Su Zimo's attacks. He could not advance. He could not retreat. He could only defend continuously until his strength was exhausted. It was a vicious cycle. Or rather, he could not last until then. After this series of head-on collisions, a faint smell of blood had already appeared in Long Yang's mouth. His teeth were already loose from the impact. The surroundings of the battlefield were completely silent. The dragons were dumbfounded. What happened before them had completely exceeded their expectations. The number 1 of the hidden dragon ranking, Long Yang of the blue dragon lineage, was suppressed by an outsider with an impure bloodline. Chapter 1087. Long She opened her mouth slightly with disbelief in her eyes. She had experienced Su Zimo's strength before. However, she had not expected that Su Zimo would be able to fight against Long Yang. As a blue dragon, Long Yang had a powerful bloodline and was number 1 on the hidden dragon ranking. His combat strength was more than double hers. How could this outsider with an impure bloodline suppress Long Yang? Could it be that this outsider's bloodline was even stronger and nobler than the blue dragon's bloodline? That was impossible. Long She rejected that thought swiftly. The primordial 9 races reigned supreme throughout history. Even the other 9 races did not dare to surpass dragons in terms of bloodline. However, how did this person do it? He had only just entered the Void Reversion realm. If he could cultivate to greater mastery and peak of the Void Reversion realm, what would it be like? Long She was way too familiar with the dragons in the Dragon Bone Valley and there was nothing new about them. However, she knew nothing about Su Zimo. Suddenly, she felt a strong curiosity towards Su Zimo. Seems like he has to transform into a dragon. Yes, if this continues, Long Yang will probably be suppressed to death by Long Emo. Transforming into a half-dragon is enough to reverse the situation. The dragons discussed softly. Although Su Zimo had the upper hand on the battlefield, this was nothing in a fight between dragons. The outcome was far from being decided, let alone life and death. Under Su Zimo's suffocating pressure, Long Yang finally could not withstand it and let out a dragon roar. A series of crackling sounds came from his body and his body expanded, tearing his clothes apart. Green scales appeared on Long Yang's body one after another, shimmering with a cold glint. His body rose to a height of 10 feet. His entire body was wrapped in green scales that were airtight without any flaws. His thighs were strong and sharp claws grew from his feet that dug deep into the stone platform. Dragon claws as such could release even more terrifying power. Long Yang's movement technique speed increased tremendously. Bang! Long Yang transformed into his half-dragon form and finally blocked Su Zimo's punch without retreating at all. This battle has just begun. Long Yang sneered. He exerted strength in his legs and his tall figure turned into a green light as he charged fiercely towards Su Zimo. Good timing. Su Zimo's eyes lit up. He did not take half a step back. With a boom, he strode out with the plow heaven stride and leaned close to Long Yang, who was approaching him. Boom! The two figures collided heavily with each other, causing a loud explosion. The entire space began to tremble. Both of them fell out. They were evenly matched. This time, the dragon's expressions changed slightly. After Long Yang transformed into a half-dragon, his strength, speed, stamina, explosive power and even defense had an extremely obvious increase. Even so, Long Yang did not have the upper hand. At this moment, Su Zimo's vitality had also been pushed to the limit. Apart from the fact that he did not use his bloodline phenomenon, his strength was completely released as well. His bloodline surged in his body like a tidal wave with a terrifying might. Su Zimo stood on the spot and his scarlet hair danced like burning flames. His gaze was bright as he roared in laughter. Awesome again! Boom! In a flash, Su Zimo vanished from the spot. By the time he reappeared, he was already in front of Long Yang. Bang! Their fists collided and the two of them clashed once more. This time round, neither of them retreated. The two of them were inches apart and glared at each other. With their powerful physiques, they withstood the power that surged into their bodies. There was a brief pause. All of a sudden, the two of them attacked at the same time, fighting speed with fist shadows. Bang, bang, bang. In the short span of 10 breaths, the two of them had exchanged at least 100 blows. Forces collided and flesh splattered in a terrifying manner. Melee combat was the most dangerous. Those 10 breaths were a perfect example of that. At this distance, no one could guarantee that they would be safe and sound. Both of them were already injured. The only thing they could do was to avoid their vitals as much as possible. Although the exchange between the two of them seemed short, in reality, it was a competition of burst power, strength, speed, and even stamina. In Long Yang's opinion, he would definitely be able to last until the end in his half-dragon form with his endless stamina and strong defense. However, after 10 breaths, Su Zimo's eyes shone brightly and he fought even more valiantly. Long Yang could clearly see that although the wounds left by his dragon claws on Su Zimo's body had not healed, they had stopped bleeding. What terrifying regeneration capabilities! Long Yang vaguely realized that if this continued, it would be unknown who would win. Boom! After another clash, Long Yang retreated and widened the distance, panting slightly. The two figures stood still once more. A commotion broke out among the dragons and an uproar broke out. Both of them were already injured. Su Zimo's scarlet robes were almost torn apart and there were wounds on his body. However, they were not fatal and were not deep. As for Long Yang, he looked extremely wretched as well. Dozens of dragon scales on his body had been knocked off, and the wounds on his body were all badly mangled. Long Yang took a deep breath and said sternly, "You're very strong and have far exceeded my expectations. I've decided not to hold back anymore and give you sufficient respect. I'll use my strongest methods to kill you here." Su Zimo had a smile on his face, completely fearless. He had fought to his heart's content in this battle. Back in the Dao inheritance ground, he could not use this body and bloodline. After that, his body was crippled by the D clan's half-martial ancestor. Ever since the Dao inheritance ground until now, Su Zimo had been suppressing a wave of anger in his heart. Now that he could finally vent it out, he felt extremely comfortable and carefree. No matter how Long Yang threatened, Su Zimo did not take it to heart. Although he was slightly injured as well, the situation was still under his control. "Come on, let me see what else you have." Su Zimo smiled gently and his blood chi burst forth. He charged forward once more, leaving a series of afterimages behind him as he arrived before Long Yang instantly with an apocalyptic aura. Boom! Su Zimo threw out a punch. This was a punch that was released after channeling his blood chi to its limits and accumulating strength to its peak. It was as though it could crush all obstacles in front of him. This was also the most terrifying punch Su Zimo had released since the start of the battle. At the same time, a dazzling and resplendent brilliance suddenly flashed out from his right eye, and it contained an extremely fierce sharpness like a scorching sun. Visual technique. Boom! A bedazzling beam of light burst forth, as though it could penetrate, burn, and tear through everything. This was the illumination eye that was even more terrifying than the illumination dragon eye. The two extreme powers suddenly burst forth in perfect coordination without any flaws. Long Yang could even smell the aura of death and his expression changed in shock. Chapter 1088. Long Yang did not have time to think. His blood chi surged and his bones mutated. His initially 10 feet tall body expanded rapidly and elongated. A slender body soared into the skies and spiraled upwards. It was the complete form of dragons. The dragon body that was dozens of feet long was covered in green scales. There were 4 claws beneath its abdomen and horns on its head. The menacing dragon head swayed and soared into the clouds. It was almost a perfect dragon body. The moment Long Yang transformed into his dragon form, the beam of the illumination eye descended and landed on the dragon body. Bang! The dragon body soared into the skies and the beam of light left a gigantic wound on the dragon body with blood gushing out. More than 10 dragon scales fell and were charred with sword marks all over them. The dragons were in an uproar when they saw that. Although the threat of visual techniques was great, their advantage was that they were instantaneous and caught the opponent off guard. The power of visual techniques was far inferior to many dermic arts. Even a powerful visual technique like the illumination dragon eye could not penetrate the defense of the blue dragon's scales and injure its body. But now, Su Zimo's visual technique almost penetrated Long Yang's dragon body. One could imagine that if Long Yang had not transformed into his complete dragon body in time, he would have been half dead by now. Bang! The blue dragon swung its tail and collided with Su Zimo's fist. Su Zimo's body shuddered as he flew backwards. The strength of Long Yang, who had transformed into a blue dragon, was way too terrifying. He could not withstand it purely by relying on his true body and bloodline of dragons. The two of them seemed to be evenly matched in their exchange. However, in reality, Long Yang was the one who suffered a huge loss. He did not say anything, but his eyes were filled with intense pain. The wound on his dragon body that was caused by the illumination eye had a huge impact on him. Up till now, there were no signs of it healing. The blue dragon lineage was the most terrifying when it came to regeneration. The burning power of the illumination dragon eye alone could not stop his body from healing. However, there was a sharpness mixed in with that wound that was tearing at his flesh continuously. It was on par with his regeneration capabilities. Long Yang shuttled through the clouds, but his body was constantly dripping with dragon blood. Every time he moved, his wounds would hurt. After transforming into the azure dragon form, the sky was filled with a heart-palpitating pressure. This was the pressure unique to dragons. Any race with inferior bloodlines would be affected by this pressure. The more inferior one's bloodline was, the greater the influence one would receive. Su Zimo looked up, his eyes shining brightly, but it was as if he couldn't feel it at all. Rumble! Within the clouds, a ferocious and terrifying dragon head suddenly stretched out. It opened its mouth and spat out a huge torrent toward Su Zimo. The torrent poured down and landed on the battlefield, forming a bottomless ocean. As a solitary cloud knew similar dermic arts. However, the ferocious flood dragons could only roam freely in lakes and ponds. The dragons, on the other hand, were the ones who could overturn rivers and seas. In the face of such power, Su Zimo was as insignificant as an ant. Almost instantly he was swallowed up by this tsunami. This dermic art was no different from a real ocean. In the face of the power of heaven and earth, any power was weak. Long Yang circled in midair and released his massive spirit consciousness. He stared at the surface of the sea with bright eyes, as though he was searching for something. A moment later, there was no movement on the surface of the sea and Long Yang heaved a sigh of relief. Roar! Long Yang let out a long roar excitedly. Is it over? The dragons looked at the battlefield and the same thought flashed through their minds. To be fair, none of the dragons at the Void Reversion Realm in the entire Dragon Bone Valley could defend against Long Yang's dermic art. However, Long Mo was different. Even though they saw Long Mo being devoured, the dragons still felt uneasy. Long Mo did not seem like he would die so easily. All of a sudden, the initially calm surface of the sea began to spin continuously, as though it was being fiddled with by a pair of invisible hands. It was getting faster and faster. A moment later, a gigantic vortex formed in the middle of the ocean. In the center of the vortex, a tall purgatory shrouded in blood chi floated up slowly with ghostly wails and howls coming from within. Break! Su Zimo's voice sounded in the purgatory. The purgatory shattered. A tall mountain of corpses appeared and dyed the entire ocean blood red. Su Zimo stood on the mountain of corpses like a grim reaper from hell that could not be looked at. The two saber intents of the Shura saber and sea calming manual fused together and Su Zimo broke free. Swoosh! Long Yang was enraged and panted heavily as he looked down at Su Zimo. All of a sudden, Long Yang swooped down and opened his mouth. An extremely terrifying roar burst forth from the depths of his throat that shook the world. It was the roar of a blue dragon. Dragons of the 5 lineages were born with a sound domain technique like dragon roars. Most cultivators would not be able to withstand the roars of mixed dragons such as flood dragons and rain dragons, let alone the 5 lineages. The power of the roar of dragons of the 5 lineages was even more terrifying. Even pure-blooded ferocious beasts that were slightly weaker could be shaken to death. Among the 5 lineages, the roar of the blue dragon was the strongest. That was because the strength of a dragon roar was closely related to one's bloodline. The strongest bloodline of the blue dragon meant that the power of the dragon roar was the greatest. Su Zimo's expression changed starkly. The moment the dragon roar sounded, he felt a piercing pain in his ears. How strong was his body? Most sound domain secret skills did not affect him when he cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. However, before the roar of the blue dragon was released completely, he already felt pain in his ears. Immediately, Su Zimo realized that he could not defend against the roar of the blue dragon if he maintained this state. If he took it head-on, his eardrums would be pierced. Even his essence spirit might be shaken. Crackle! Suddenly, a series of abnormal movements came from Su Zimo's body. Shing! The clothes on his body were torn apart, and his body expanded rapidly. Scarlet-red scales grew on his body, like red-hot iron plates, emitting a scorching aura. Dragonification. Half-dragon form. In the eyes of the dragons, it was not right that Long Yang could not suppress Su Zimo right away even after transforming into his complete dragon form. However, the dragons did not know that up till this point of his cultivation, the only living being that could force Su Zimo to this extent was the Protoss commander of the past. Even against Di-In, Su Zimo did not have to transform into a dragon. After transforming into his half-dragon form, Su Zimo's strength, speed and defense increased exponentially as well. The piercing pain in his ears was greatly reduced. However, that was not enough. The roar of the blue dragon had already erupted completely. Su Zimo's eyes lit up and his blood chi surged. The phantom of a divine dragon appeared behind him, spiraling upwards in a lifelike manner. The man and dragon glared at Long Yang, who was charging over, exuding a shuddering aura with a wanton might. For some reason, Long Yang felt a hint of fear when he was stared at by the man and dragon and instinctively paused. Chapter 1089. What is that? A bloodline phenomenon? Long Mo has actually cultivated a bloodline phenomenon. The dragons were in an uproar. In the Dragon Bone Valley, there were at least 20 dragons who had cultivated to the tide-like blood. However, there was only one who could cultivate a bloodline phenomenon. It was the only 5-clawed divine dragon of the blue dragon lineage, the current number 1 of the heavenly dragon ranking, the young master of the blue dragon lineage, Long Tsung. But now, they saw a bloodline phenomenon on another dragon. One could imagine how shocked the dragons were. Although Long Mo has cultivated a bloodline phenomenon, his phenomenon doesn't seem to be as strong as Long Tsung's phenomenon. The difference is way too great. They can't be compared at all. Long Tsung's bloodline phenomenon is enough to suppress a divine dragon like Long Mo with ease. The dragon's guesses were both right and wrong. That divine dragon phantom was indeed Su Zimo's bloodline phenomenon. However, it was only one of his 8 demon kings. Su Zimo did not reveal all of his phenomenons. Firstly, Long Yang had not forced him to that extent yet. Secondly, it was way too shocking for 8 demon kings to appear at the same time. Not to mention, a blood-colored butterfly would appear after the 8 demon kings. A dragon said in a deep voice, "Even so, even the weakest bloodline phenomenon is powerful and cannot be underestimated." Long Mo has already transformed into a half-dragon. If he were to transform into a complete dragon, Long Yang would be doomed. Impossible! Another dragon shook his head. Long Mo's bloodline is impure. Transforming into a half-dragon is already his limit. The dragon was right. Right now, Su Zimo could only transform into a half-dragon at most and could not transform into a complete dragon for some reason. However, even in his half-dragon form, it was enough for him to sweep through everything. The power of the blue dragon's roar had already erupted completely. Standing on the spot, Su Zimo's gaze was burning as he suddenly opened his mouth. The divine dragon behind him opened its mouth at the same time. The man and dragon's movements were synchronized and there was no difference. Suddenly, a deafening roar burst forth. The world trembled and the clouds changed. It was met head-on with a dragon roar. The power of the 2 dragon roars collided in midair. The entire world seemed to have quietened down. Instantly, there was silence. Great sound void. However, every single dragon's hearts shuddered. Long Yang's body trembled and he suddenly grunted. His face turned pale. The dragons were moved. As everyone knew, the cry of the blue dragon was the strongest among the cries of the 5 lineages. The 2 dragon roars collided, but Long Yang was at a disadvantage. What did that mean? Could it be that Long Mo's bloodline was stronger than the blue dragon bloodline? Disbelief appeared on the faces of the dragons. All of a sudden, Su Zimo rose from the ground and took advantage of the moment when Long Yang's body shuddered to leap up. He parted the clouds and rode on Long Yang's neck. Long Yang was enraged. To the dragon race, being ridden on the neck was a great humiliation. No one could surpass him. The dignity of dragons was not to be trampled on. Su Zimo did not care. His legs were powerful as he gripped Long Yang's neck tightly. Raising his fist, he smashed down viciously on Long Yang's head. Bang! There was a deafening sound. Long Yang cried out tragically. Su Zimo's punch was enough to shatter divine weapons. However, it could not break open Long Yang's head. It was clear how strong the blue dragon's body was. However, when the punch landed, Long Yang's head was also badly mutilated. Long Yang roared angrily and his eyes were bloodshot. His entire body rolled continuously and released a series of spinning and twisting powers. Even though Su Zimo's legs were gripping Long Yang's neck tightly, he was almost thrown into the air. Su Zimo hurriedly reached out with both hands and gripped Long Yang's pair of dragon horns tightly to stabilize himself. However, Long Yang's body did not show any signs of stopping as he rolled, shuttled, circled and spun in midair. As for Su Zimo, he could only stabilize himself with both hands and legs. However, he could not free his hands to continue attacking. Both sides fell into a strange stalemate. Of course, if nothing unexpected happened, such a stalemate would consume a lot of Long Yang's stamina. If this continued, his defeat was inevitable. Long Imo made a huge mistake. That's right. The horn of the blue dragon contains many offensive dermic formulations and the essence of one's strength. Long Imo is courting death by holding onto the horn of the blue dragon. The dragons watched coldly from the sidelines and naturally saw everything more clearly. Just as they were discussing, Long Yang's dragon horns suddenly turned red like burning iron rods and their temperature rose continuously. Su Zimo's gaze focused. This should have been a dermic formulation of the Illumination Dragon lineage, but Long Yang could control it freely. Under normal circumstances, if anyone else continued to hold onto the blue dragon horns, their palms would be burned to ashes. If they let go, they would naturally be thrown down. However, Su Zimo was the one riding on Long Yang's neck. In his eyes, Long Yang's counterattack was not a threat at all. Firstly, his right hand was the divine phoenix bone. Even if his flesh was burned to ashes, the bones in his right hand would not be damaged. Secondly, Su Zimo would not hold onto the dragon horns foolishly. He had a trump card as well. All right, I'll let you experience the might of Baron. Su Zimo sneered coldly and his eyes lit up as he secretly conjured hand seals. Suddenly, 2 balls of gray mist appeared in his palms. The 2 balls of gray mist enveloped the scarlet dragon horns and isolated them from the high temperature. Su Zimo was still gripping the blue dragon horns tightly and his palms were unharmed. Long Imo actually has a way to deal with it as well. As the saying goes, virtue rises 1 foot, the devil rises 10 feet. I'm afraid it's hard to say who will win. What's that gray mist dermic art? Why does it seem like it's not very powerful? Many dragons frowned slightly with confusion in their eyes. On the surface, the power of Baron only isolated the heat of the blue dragon horns. However, in reality, Baron was already used on Long Yang. Long Yang's lifespan was decreasing at a rate of 500 years per breath. In the blink of an eye, 10 breaths passed and Long Yang's lifespan was reduced by more than 5,000 years. Normally speaking, the lifespan of a void reversion was only 5,000 years. However, dragons were one of the primordial 9 races and once dominated the primordial era. Their bloodline was strong and was different from humans. Although dragons had an extremely low reproduction rate, they had long lifespans. Even without cultivating, they had lifespans of tens of thousands or even 100,000 years. As for human cultivators, they could only live for 100,000 years after entering the Mahayana realm. That was the difference. That was the reason why Long Yang, who possessed a long lifespan, did not sense anything unusual after Baron descended. The first to realize that something was amiss was not Long Yang, but the many dragons' elders who were hiding in the dark. On the surface, this battle seemed like a life and death battle between 2 dragons. However, it had already alarmed the elders of the 5 lineages of dragons. Chapter 1090. In a corner not far away from the dragon blood battlefield, 5 blurry figures stood, as though they were in another dimension, watching the battle silently. Even if dragons passed by, they would not be able to see them. The 5 figures were elders from the 5 lineages of dragons. Elder 4 of the Illumination Dragon lineage was here to watch the battle. Does the Illumination Dragon lineage really intend to let this lad be the young master? The dragon's elder frowned slightly and his tone was clearly doubtful. Elder Ing Dragons shook his head as well. This lad's combat strength is not weak. However, his bloodline is impure and his potential is limited. He's not worth nurturing. The other dragons were still rather critical of Elder Illumination Dragon for sending Su Zimo and Solitary Cloud into the primordial divine spring to recuperate. Torch Dragon 4th Elder merely smiled and said, "Let's continue watching." As time passed by, the elders gradually revealed looks of surprise. To think that this lad's combat strength would reach such a level. This is somewhat beyond my expectations. His bloodline is impure and he can't transform into a complete dragon. That's not a big problem. Once he cultivates to the perfected void reversion realm and receives the baptism of the ancestral dragon divine pillar, he should be able to transform. The elders of the 5 dragons commented as they chatted. As the battle progressed, the elders' attitude towards Su Zimo gradually changed as well. 2 breaths after Baron descended, the dragon's elder smiled gently. Interesting, this lad possesses the power to weaken lifespans. 500 years in a single breath. It's fine against low-level races, but it's useless against us dragons. The elder of the Black Dragon people had a relaxed expression and was not too bothered. After 7 breaths, Elder 4 of Illumination Dragon said in a low voice with a grim expression, "Something's wrong." The other 4 elders exchanged glances and noticed something amiss at the same time. The dragon's elder narrowed his eyes and said sternly, "The power of this dermic art to reduce one's lifespan is irreversible." Although dermic arts that targeted lifespan were extremely rare and precious, it was not as if they did not exist. However, the power of these dermic arts could be recovered. Simply put, the release of a dermic art would reduce one's lifespan by 500 years. After the dermic art ended, the lifespan would be recovered. But desolation was different. Losing 500 years of lifespan was equivalent to losing 500 years of lifespan. It was irreversible and irreversible. This was too terrifying. No one would complain about having a long life. Just think about it, a high-spirited and graceful young man suddenly had his lifespan reduced by 70 years and became an old man with 1 foot in the grave. What sort of terrifying situation was this? Even dragons with long lifespans would not be able to remain indifferent when their lifespans were reduced by thousands of years. As elders, they shouldn't interfere in this kind of life and death battle between the younger generation of dragons. However, Long Yang was ranked first on the hidden dragon roll. On the other hand, Su Zimo was an outsider who had joined the dragons for less than half a year. His bloodline was not pure, so it was inevitable that his feelings would be biased. The Black Dragon people's elder furrowed his brows and walked out of the void. The other 4 hurriedly followed. "Old tree, it's not good to interfere in the fight between the younger generation, right? Dragons have never broken this rule," Torch Dragon 4th Elder said with a frown. The Black Dragon people's elder had a hesitant expression as well. Right then, the expressions of the 5 dragons' elders changed at the same time. Initially, they were in the void and could not sense it. It was only when they were outside that they could clearly sense the terror of Baron. The power of this dermic art ignores one's cultivation realm? The dragon's elder widened his eyes in disbelief. "I think so." The dragon's elder's expression changed gradually as he nodded. This meant that when this dermic art descended on them, their lifespans would be reduced by 500 years per breath as well. Of course, given their combat strength, they could kill Su Zimo in less than a breath. Even so, this spell was enough to shock the world. Elder Ing Dragon said meaningfully, "This long MO has truly given us too many surprises." At that moment, 10 breaths had passed since Su Zimo released the Baron dermic art. A look of determination flashed through the eyes of the Black Dragon people's elder and he was prepared to attack. If this continued, even if Long Yang did not die, a paragon like the Black Dragon people would die after expending too much of his lifespan. At this moment, there was a sudden change on the battlefield. Su Zimo, who initially had the upper hand, leaped down from Long Yang's body and dispersed the gray fog with both hands. He stood at the other end of the battlefield with an indifferent expression. He had stopped. Su Zimo, who initially had the upper hand, did not kill them all. Instead, he stopped at the right time. Although losing 5,000 years of lifespan was a considerable loss for Long Yang, it was not fatal. This was a lesson and a warning. After Su Zimo stopped, The Black Dragon People's elder retracted his footsteps and heaved a sigh of relief. In the dragon blood battlefield, Su Zimo looked at Long Yang not far away with a calm gaze. The outcome of this battle was decided. Or rather, life and death were decided. If he continued to use Baron, Long Yang would have no other choice. There would only be one outcome. His lifespan would be exhausted and he would die. He was not a bloodthirsty person to begin with and did not have any deep feud with Long Yang. He did not intend to kill him. It was enough to reduce his lifespan by 5,000 years as a lesson. Long Yang hovered in midair motionlessly and glared at Su Zimo with a complicated expression. The initial anger in his eyes was no longer there. He could naturally sense Su Zimo's mercy. However, he would not admit defeat. Deep down, he was prouder than anyone else. Long Imo, don't think that you can make me admit defeat just because you stopped. Long Yang pursed his lips with a stubborn expression as he grit his teeth. I still have one more move. I haven't lost yet. The dragons were shocked. They could sense Long Yang's will to die. He was truly going to fight to the death. Long Yang, stop. Long she could not help but shout. Long Yang shook his head and looked at Su Zimo, saying slowly, Su Zimo, take this. Essence Spirit Secret Skill, Blue Dragon's Wrath. Before he could finish his sentence, green light burst forth from Long Yang's glabella and a green divine dragon with towering horns tore out of his body. It opened its bloody mouth and charged towards Su Zimo with a menacing expression. The dragon's hearts tightened. A fight between essence spirits. Success or failure depended on this move. In the eyes of the dragons, Su Zimo had joined the Dragon Bone Valley for less than a year and had yet to cultivate the essence spirit's secret skills of the dragons. Against this move, Su Zimo was most likely doomed. However, on the battlefield, Su Zimo had a calm expression as he looked at the incoming Azure Dragon. His glabella shone and his massive spirit consciousness condensed continuously. A palm-sized scarlet scale floated out from his glabella. It looked extremely ordinary. Compared to Long Yang's Blue Dragon's Wrath, it was nothing special. It was only a dragon scale. The reverse scale of a dragon. Chapter 1091. It was the essence spirit secret skill of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, the Yang Spirit section. It was also the essence of the Yang Spirit section. The reverse scale was a scale in an extremely hidden area beneath the necks of dragons. It was crescent-shaped and once touched, it would definitely incur the wrath of the dragons. Therefore, there was a saying that had been passed down since ancient times. Anyone who touched the reverse scale of a dragon would definitely die. That statement was the essence of the essence spirit secret skill. The scarlet reverse scale in midair did not have to enter Long Yang's consciousness to kill him. It could only kill him by making contact with his essence spirit. As long as Long Yang's Blue Dragon's Wrath collided with the reverse scale, his essence spirit would be destroyed even if it was dozens of feet away. That was the terror of the reverse scale. That reverse scale was not to be touched. Anyone who touched it would die. Throughout history, there had never been an essence spirit secret skill that possessed such domineering power. The moment the reverse scale descended, the dragons could not sense it. However, Long Yang felt his scalp tingle and a chill run down his spine, causing his hair to stand on end. He had a feeling in his heart. It was as though he would die the next moment. At the same time, the elders of the 5 lineage dragons who were watching from afar were shocked as well. Given their cultivation realms, they could naturally sense the terrifying aura emitted by the reverse scale. The green divine dragon in midair looked majestic and powerful with a torrential aura. However, it was far inferior compared to the reverse scale. The two essence spirit secret skills burst forth and collided instantly. Even the elders of the 5 lineage dragons could not make it in time. Long Yang is finished. That thought flashed through the minds of the elders of the 5 lineage dragons at the same time. The eyes of the elder of the Black Dragon people were filled with deep regret. He should have stepped forward when Long Imo just now showed mercy. If he had stepped forward in time, that terrifying killing move would not have descended and Long Yang would not have died. Long Emo could not be blamed for this. It was only right for Long Emo to kill Long Yang in a life and death battle. Furthermore, Long Emo had already stopped before this. Perhaps this is Long Yang's fate. The elder of the Black Dragon people let out a long sigh. A battle between essence spirits took a long time to describe, but it actually happened in an instant. In midair, the ferocious green dragon crashed directly into the reverse scale, and its entire body instantly stopped in midair. Then, under the watchful eyes of everyone, cracks appeared on the azure dragon's body. That reverse scale was undamaged. Not far away, Long Yang's expression suddenly froze on his face. His gaze was blank and unfocused as it gradually dimmed. Su Zimo frowned slightly. If he persevered, although his essence spirit would be shaken, Long Yang would definitely die. However, there was no need for him to do so. Su Zimo's heart stirred, and he dispersed the reverse scale. In midair, the green divine dragon did not last long before it turned into light spots and dissipated into the air. Long Yang closed his eyes and his huge body fell from the sky. With a loud bang, he crashed onto the battlefield, causing dust to fly everywhere. Su Zimo sighed softly. Long Yang was not dead. However, his essence spirit was already filled with cracks. Thankfully, Su Zimo stopped in time. If the reverse scale had existed for a moment longer, Long Yang's essence spirit might have been destroyed and he might have died. The elders of the 5 lineage dragons heaved a sigh of relief when they sensed the changes that happened. The elder of the Black Dragon people was even more delighted. On the battlefield, the life aura in Long Yang's body was negligible and almost undetectable. The dragons did not know about Long Yang's situation and thought that he was dead. The dragons were in an uproar. Some were enraged, some were shocked, some were sad, and some were stunned on the spot. In the eyes of the dragons, Long Yang was already at perfected void reversion realm. Even if a battle between essence spirits was dangerous, there was no way he would die. But now, Long Yang was lying motionless on the ground without any signs of life. Long Yang was dead in battle. Many dragons rushed onto the battlefield. Some blue dragons had bloodshot eyes with sorrowful expressions. A blue dragon turned around and glared at Su Zimo, shouting, "Su Zimo, I want to challenge you. Let's fight to the death in this dragon blood battlefield." "Let me do it. Long Emo, I challenge you." Another Black Dragon people stood out. "What are you guys doing?" Long Can of the Candle Dragons hurriedly stood beside Su Zimo and shouted, "This is a life and death battle between the two of them. You can't blame Brother Emo." "So be it. Do you think we Candle Dragons will be afraid of you guys?" Another Candle Dragon said loudly. "All of you quiet down." Long she roared. However, her voice was quickly drowned out by the clamor of the battlefield. The crowd was ferocious. In the blink of an eye, a group battle was about to break out in the dragon blood battlefield. "What are you guys doing?" Right then, a dignified voice sounded in midair and entered the ears of every dragon. It was extremely intimidating. The dragons were shocked and looked towards the voice. 5 figures stood in midair, exuding powerful auras. Their auras were unbridled. Against the suppression of that might, the blood of the dragons that had just surged gradually calmed down. The elders of the 5 lineages of dragons had arrived. "What's the commotion? Do you guys have any manners?" The elder of the Black Dragon people surveyed his surroundings with a sharp gaze. None of the dragons dared to meet his gaze. "Elder, that outsider killed Brother Yang." Finally, a blue dragon could not help it and said sadly with reddened eyes, "The dragon blood battlefield is a life and death battle to begin with. If you're afraid of death, don't come here." The elder of the Black Dragon people said coldly. But the blue dragon was still indignant. He was of the same lineage as Long Yang to begin with and was naturally extremely close to the latter in his heart. Su Zimo had been in the Dragon Bone Valley for less than a year and was of the Illumination Dragon lineage with an impure bloodline. In his eyes, Su Zimo was an outsider. "No buts," the elder of the Black Dragon people shook his head. "This is the rule of dragons. There's no room for doubt." Pausing for a moment, the elder of the Black Dragon people looked deeply at Su Zimo and said slowly, "Furthermore, Long Yang isn't dead yet? The moment he said that, the dragons were stunned. Long Yang was not dead? Under normal circumstances, even if one's essence spirit did not die immediately after suffering such injuries, it would be unsalvageable. However, there was a primordial divine spring in the Dragon Bone Valley that could revive the dead. The elder of the Black Dragon people waved his sleeves and released a stream of dermic powers. Long Yang's massive body transformed into human form. The elder of the Black Dragon people's gaze landed on Su Zimo again. Pausing for a moment, he nodded to the latter before leaving with Long Yang. Although the elder of the Black Dragon people did not say anything, that nod was already rare. The elder of the Black Dragon people expressed his gratitude to Su Zimo. Just now, the essence spirit fight happened in an instant and the dragons did not know what happened. However, the elders of the 5 lineages could sense it. If Su Zimo had not held back, Long Yang would have died by now. This battle not only established Su Zimo's status among the Dragons Juniors, he also obtained the recognition of many Dragons Elders. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.